Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you're watching second and final part of what if Naruto lost his life during Sasuke Retrieval arc. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
The force of good triumphed over the evil force that possessed Princess Luna, purifying the kind princess in a battle to end all battles, and Equestria won what was likely the most significant battle in a millennium. As those who knew the truth remained silent about what truly transpired, Celestia's message spread throughout her territories. She had to go to the summer sun celebration on a very difficult day when all of the real heroes were either asleep or in bed. She used a quick lie to allay the fear that their heroic citizens would not return, saying that they needed the tiniest checkups after such heroic deeds. The crowd devoured it like she would eat a slice of cake. In other words, there was not a single doubt among them all. When she arrived at the scene of the battle, she was moved to tears by the sight of her three beloved students lying on the ground with severe injuries that would have killed any pony in their position. To her surprise, her sister was unconscious and covered in various burns. Her tail was only a stub that barely covered her most modest areas, and her teeth were gnarled, as if they had been kicked in repeatedly. She was only sad that she wasn't the one bearing this burden, so she hurried them both to Canterlot's hospital in the hopes that they would respect her just as much as she respected them, even though she wasn't doing anything about it. Celestia assured Twilight's friends that she would call them when their friend woke up, which she didn't do a few hours later, but she was still bedridden for several reasons. It had been a week since that fateful battle, and almost all of the ponies involved had recovered. Celestia spoke with the six of them for a long time, praising them for stopping her sister, which they politely accepted and ignored before moving on to the topic at hand. They all expressed their worries about Sunset and Naruto, primarily Naruto, but any conversations that led to him were reassured that he was fine and that he was merely sleeping off the few injuries he actually had. However, they didn't need to know that their inquisitiveness and their protracted discussion about the five soon left, leaving Twilight to make a choice and Celestia to deal with a slightly more significant issue, that of her sister, that was beginning to surface. Things went gradually better for Twilight, but not so well for Luna, who woke up the next. It was 3 days later, mind you, and that was a long time for them to heal from their wounds. Since she was fortunately completely restrained, Celestia honestly thought that was because a unicorn had her mouth open and her horn close to her sister's mangled teeth. However, as the unicorn's horn approached her mouth, it did little to reassure her younger sister. The unicorn found the process challenging, but in the end, it was a grateful miracle that she restored the alicorn's teeth to their original condition. Curious about what her sister thought of everything that had happened, Celestia hurried back to her side and undid the restraints when she got there. When she entered the room, they exchanged intense looks. Celestia was pleasantly surprised when Luna started crying and apologized repeatedly as Luna took to her hoofs and accepted whatever punishment came her way, which solely depended on her two students. It took hours for their peaceful resolution to come to an end and for any doubt about her sister's loyalty to be dispelled. Sunset Shimmer was the next to awaken after being unconscious for 4.5 days. 4 too many days for the obstinate unicorn. Even Celestia's arrival did nothing to calm the mare's rage as she insisted on finding Naruto. She remembered seeing the mare bite the closest doctor and slam her hoofs into the closest nurse who attempted to stop her from leaving the room. An anesthetic had finally put her down as she vowed to burn the hospital down if she didn't see Naruto. Her eyes were filled with hatred as the orderlies pinned her down, blood coating her teeth. As her wounds finally started to heal, she felt bad for him, but she couldn't really blame her because the alicorn was aware of this since Naruto was still unconscious and would stay that way until he woke up, which she was certain he would. She complied with the request, even though it wasn't really a problem. Celestia attempted to engage Sunset in conversation about the day-to-day operations of the hospital, but most of her attempts were met with clever rebuttals that were about as damaging as a light breeze, while some were genuinely humorous, such as the one about the Pegasus that left them a gift, a coin, based on the appearance of it. The mare's eyes were saddened by discussions about Nightmare Moon. The alicorn would venture to assume that the wounds she had sustained in such a bloody conflict weighed heavily on her thoughts. She confided in Sunset, just as she did with Twilight and the others, and she would take care of Naruto when he woke up. Her sister was the enemy they faced that night, and Celestia anticipated a look of shock or surprise from the mare, but instead she saw that constant knowing expression, as if she had already figured out the solution. It wasn't until the 7th day that Sunset's fears vanished, her eyes opened, and she had what may have been the second most significant conversation with Naruto. The tiled white ceiling flooded his vision, the antiseptic smell filled his nostrils, and the occasional heart monitor beat gave him the unsatisfactory response that he was in a hospital, causing cerulean eyes to blink in confusion. He got up slowly from his uncomfortable pillow to see a smiling Celestia in front of him, a stack of presents that he assumed were for him, and a tired but relieved-looking Sunset to his left. However, the fact that a purple alicorn was staring at him with a look of shame and possibly fear was a little strange. So we won, right? Naruto bit his jaw in confusion. He recalled defeating whatever it was and fainting, but he wasn't positive if anything else had occurred. Sunset huffed and seemed to ignore the enigmatic alicorn, saying, "Yes, we won, idiot. Sheesh, nothing else happened, but Celestia showed up after you blew that thing to Tartarus and back, but on the bad side you missed a week." The alicorn turned away and muttered to herself, "Oh, stop with the glare. It wasn't intimidating when I yelled at Celestia before, and it's even less intimidating now." In an attempt to shift the conversation, Naruto said, "So who's she?" Celestia could only smirk as Naruto's face changed into different versions. It was kind of funny. "I'm glad you asked. Naruto, this my sister Princess Luna." She was appreciative of Naruto's display of restraint as he gazed at her sister, his anger now visible in his eyes, and the response wasn't unexpected because Naruto visibly stiffened at the mention of Nightmare Moon. She was also Nightmare Moon, before twilight separated her from that creature. Luna said softly, "I'm sorry." The alicorn moved forward, her gaze fixed on the ground, and she approached Naruto, willing to take any punishment he thought appropriate for her. She looked up into Naruto's eyes, expecting to see raging rage and perhaps his hoof crashing down on her face. "That bewitching wisp might have been influencing my actions, but your injuries are still my own doing. 'Twas not my intention for this altercation to go as far as it did." Naruto smiled, "It's fine, water under the bridge," as he saw Luna's eyes well up with tears that were on the verge of falling. She hugged the recuperating alicorn while fighting back the tears. He looked at Sunset, who was examining each of him thoughtfully. Celestia, on the other hand, was grinning at the screen, but there was something strange about it, as if she had a secret that she was holding back from him until the perfect moment. "You're not telling me everything, are you?" Luna pulled away the alicorn and returned to her sister with bloodshot eyes, and Naruto felt a wave of unease as Celestia's smile faded. The words came out lighter than expected, despite the heavy implications behind them. Celestia's tone was darker than usual as her horn lit up. A flash of yellow magic spread throughout the room as 6 objects hovered before him. "You're right. I wish you weren't bedridden as you were, but if I delayed this conversation, I honestly don't know what the repercussions might be, and if this past week has taught me anything, it's that hesitancy will only bring disaster to our land. Do you know what this is, Naruto?" The golden crown in front of him had his cutie mark as the headpiece, but it was an orange crystal swirl rather than the red one he had on his flank. Naruto stared blankly at the objects that hovered in the air, feeling a sense of familiarity as he looked at the purple, green, blue, red, and yellow shards of crystal, the remaining pieces of the element of harmony. He paled at the thought, saying, "I know those are pieces of the elements of harmony, but I have no idea what the crown is for. Are you making me a prince or something?" His life in Canterlot was already somewhat stuffy, and he didn't want to think about what he would have to do if he were to become a prince in order to have a moment of freedom. Celestia said, "That's the element of magic, Naruto, or at least I believe half of it." She watched as Naruto blinked, then again, and then a few more times just to be safe. It would take him a few seconds to erupt. Naruto shook his head back and forth, refusing to accept the likely situation that was currently unfolding. "Wait, what?" he cried. Celestia's calm, collected voice demanded that he at least listen to her before categorically rejecting her theory. "I believe you had me the first time, Naruto. This is your element of harmony, and as I said before, I believe that this is the element of magic." Naruto eyed Celestia. The princess smirked and shook her head as she placed the crown on his hospital bed. "I know you're implying that I'm the element of magic, but Sunset and I can vouch that we saw Twilight blast Luna with the rainbow magic and separate the two of them. She figured out the elements of harmony, not me, so go take the crown to her." Celestia watched as Luna turned away and rubbed the back of her head sheepishly at what her older sister had just said. "She figured out the elements of harmony, that is true, but I believe she wasn't the only one that tried to find the spark. Sunset, Luna, and Twilight herself recall you using magic alongside her to try and activate the elements before they were shattered." As Sunset turned away, Celestia concluded, "I believe that they reacted to both magical influences before their destruction and in very different ways." Twilight herself felt a pride in finding friends that would stand beside her, and with that she genuinely opened up and accepted friendship. I want to say that this is the likely reason that Luna and the Frightmare were disconnected, all because she was more inclined to accept friendship. Based on the expression on his face, it appeared that Naruto agreed. As each pair of eyes turned to her, Sunset said analytically, "That still doesn't explain why he's an element of harmony. All you basically said was that the new friendships that Twilight made spared Luna from being put back on the moon." When Celestia looked back at Naruto, She saw that he was still hesitant to engage in this conversation. Celestia asked, "Exactly, so Naruto, what did you feel when you stared down that frightmare?" As their eyes met again, curious about his response, Celestia was able to guess what it was. Naruto blinked as he considered the situation, the fight that was taking place in front of him, his mistakes, what he could have done, what he ought to have done, and what he unavoidably did do. As they exchanged blows, he had one thought. He had to defend everyone because Nightmare Moon was going to hurt many of his friends, ponies he thought of his family, and numerous ponies who had done nothing wrong to merit an eternity of darkness, no matter how long it might last. I wanted to protect every pony, not just Sunset, Twilight and every pony else at the castle. Every pony. I made so many friends already, and it seems like a waste to lose them all because one alicorn had a bone to pick with the world for not enjoying the night. Luna averted her gaze due to the statement's genuineness. He stopped staring directly at her, and Sisha grinned, her ears perking up at the earnestness of his words. "That's why I believe it shows you, Naruto. The difference between you and Twilight regarding the elements of harmony wasn't accepting something that every living thing should have, nor was it a life-altering change of views and accepting others into your life. No, I personally believe that you knew about how precious friendship was from the beginning, and instead it reacted to your will to preserve those bonds you created, especially when you were going as far as putting your life on the line when it mattered the most to preserve those bonds." Celestia concluded as Naruto began to accept his role as a component of balance. Celestia removed the crown from the bed, leaving Naruto with the 5 shattered pieces. "However, you are just one element and there are 5 mares unaccounted for, so please take these fragments with you until you find the remaining elements." Naruto grabbed the biggest shard he could find and simply shook his head. With his 3 hooves touching the ground, Naruto pulled himself off the bed and walked on unsteady legs towards Sunset's bed, saying, "It's 4 princess, 4 mares I have to find." Carrying the object in his hoof made the task more challenging. As he planted the red crystal firmly in her hooves, the mare's expression changed from one of contemplation to one of surprise. It was immediately clear whether this was a sign of Naruto's conviction or Sunset's loyalty. Before a necklace with a red sun as the focal point was wrapped around her neck, it glowed for a brief moment. "I mean, if Sunset wasn't my element of loyalty, I wouldn't know who could be." Naruto remained silent, tears streaming down his best friend's face because he didn't think it was possible. Celestia's only reaction to the miraculous event that took place in a dimly lit hospital room was the click of her necklace coming loose. Without uttering a word, she departed, her sister trailing closely behind. Luna whispered, "'Twas you that said that the elements bearers chosen through harrowing deals are gargantuan feats, dear sister," as Celestia paused to gaze at her with a sly smile on her face. She said softly, but the underlying message was clear. "I believe Sunset had already accomplished both of those, don't you? She fought you alongside him, and that's not counting the few adventures that she drug him to do with her before your arrival. If Sunset wasn't Naruto's element of loyalty, the only other element I could find even remotely close to the mare's nature would be kindness." Luna's royal voice boomed through the hospital as patients, nurses, orderlies, and a few doctors stared at her in bewilderment. She gave a sheepish look, which quickly turned into a scowl at Celestia. "You jest. We enjoyed jolly quips and pranks of the jovial kind. This, however, isn't something to be humorous about. That mare has the tongue of a viper and twice the venom. I see no justification of her being such an element." As Luna finished, the frown persisted. If Celestia was offended, she was doing a pretty good job of hiding it. Celestia continues to leave the hospital as ponies give her and Luna polite bows, and with a quick nod and wave of her hoof, they all continue their day. "Luna, my dear sister, I know Sunset so well, it was as if she were a daughter to me. The mare is as sharp-tongued as they come, but beneath that cold prickly exterior is a mare with a heart of gold which only comes for the slightest of moments. Luna, I may not know what the future holds for Equestria, but I do know a thing or two about my students, and can tell you this, that even though I didn't foresee Naruto becoming a bearer, but I knew that regardless of what happened that those 2 ponies would be together until the end of their days." Celestia winked at Luna before teleporting back to the castle to conceal Naruto's elements and give her sister time to think about what he had said. After 2.5 days as Naruto soaked in his so-called freedom from his hospital stay and imprisonment, he made every effort to prevent a smile from spreading across his face. His saddlebags shifted uncomfortably against his sides, their contents rattling back and forth as he stretched his hooves, allowing his joints to crack at the simple freedom to do whatever he felt like. He was urged to stay in order to fully recover by a few doctors and a nurse named Tenderheart, but as soon as he could run around the hospital without collapsing in agony, that was all the motivation he needed to leave the disgusting facility. Although it was difficult to leave Sunset by herself in the dimly lit area, The mare insisted on spending some time by herself. It was strange that she had become more reserved after learning that she was an element. Perhaps this was a significant development after all. He looked up at the night sky, which appeared more vivid than before, as if it had come to life. Naruto was prepared to bet that it was because Luna was once more keeping an eye on things. Although Celestia was great and undoubtedly powerful, she was limited in her abilities, and while the mare could likely maintain control over the perpetual night, it was best left in the hands of the mare who had done it in the first place. If not under close supervision, he moved slowly, oblivious to the crowds, and made his way to Canterlot Castle. The luminescent moonlight streaming down the ivory walls made them shine brighter than before, illuminating any previous hiding spots used by the night watch. He waved curtly at them, and they responded with a scowl or dismissal that essentially meant to go to bed. They were working hard to keep your sorry flank safe. He had not slept in his bed in what seemed like an eternity, so he did so, albeit more quickly. He galloped through the corridor with his hooves clacking against the floor, not so deftly avoiding the occasional night watch unicorn that glared at him as he went by. The familiar sight of orange finally caused his hooves to slow down. His room's door was one of the most conspicuous doors in the neighborhood. It was painted orange and stood out against the immaculate white walls that encircled it, with gold trim sporadically placed near the floor. With a satisfying silence, Naruto unlocked the door and let it swing open. His Spartan-like room was filled with gifts that he had no idea how to use, and he was somewhat relieved that a clone had brought everything here earlier. He looked at the cards expressing gratitude or wishing him a speedy recovery. A sizable wicker basket of apples, clearly from the apple family but possibly just Applejack, was placed elegantly on his chair. He wasn't quite sure at the moment. This was accompanied by a well-made blue scarf that was most likely made by Rarity in a book called Practical Magic for the Magically Impaired, which he assumed was from Twilight and possibly Spike. A Jack-in-the-Box from Pinkie Pie, an autographed picture of Rainbow Dash, and a cup from Fluttershy. He could tell by the assortment of birds on it, were the more economical presents. Other presents included a set of aviators from Spitfire, a few picture frames from Octavia for which he was thankful, and a ton of junk from other adoring ponies that he didn't care for. He wondered how we were going to get rid of half of this stuff without upsetting any ponies in general. As he wandered through the presents, he noticed an odd pendant that he had missed. It was triangular, and on top of it, or at least the top half of one, was what appeared to be an alicorn with its wings spread wide and its head stuck in a defiant pose. Naruto didn't know what it was made of, but he could tell that something was missing. A big hole in the middle of it that resembled a diamond, and a much smaller hole where its eye was, but it didn't seem to matter to the object. After giving the item one more quick look, Naruto put it in his saddlebag along with the fragments of the elements of harmony. That gorgeous and pricey Cloudsdale cloudbed was calling his name right now, and he would look at it or show it to someone tomorrow. Using his magic, he made another pass, and an all too familiar frown appeared on his face as a clone appeared out of nowhere. As the clone looked toward the saddlebag in obedience to its creator's orders, he spoke forcefully but exhaustedly, "Just watch them. Those things are important after all." Shortly after, Naruto's head hit his bed's soft, fluffy cushion and fell into dreamland. A figure in a cloak moved through Canterlot Castle, swerving around the guards and avoiding the ponies that were out and about at this hour. Years of practice allowed her to get past the security and make her way to her destination. Magenta's eyes were fixed on the orange door, which was a rather annoying sight in contrast to the immaculate castle she had sneaked into. As she looked into the room, her hoof gripped the door knob and slowly twisted it open, causing it to swing open silently. The figure suppressed a smirk since the room was largely darkened by the open door and only the moon could light it. Even the light from the famous moon barely made it into the room, giving it the bare minimum of visibility, something she had grown accustomed to for a long time. Her hoof slowly moved forward and entered the room as her gaze landed on its occupant, an orange unicorn who just so happened to get the unfortunate draw of her unintentionally entering his room while he was recovering. She asked about her sudden entrance into the hospital room while observing his angry roommate's questioning gaze. Her flank was only saved by quick thinking, as she claimed to give a gift under the unicorn's guise to help her recover quickly. Her breath caught as she placed the fragment of the alicorn amulet in the gift pile, praying that neither her enemy's grunts nor the fabled relic were being sought after. Fortunately, they were unaware of it, and even better, the goon squad was unaware of her actions. She waited outside the hospital for the blonde to be released, and she was impressed when he emerged carrying the heap of trash just before entering his room earlier today. For any pony, 3 days was a very short recovery period, and for a unicorn, it seemed unachievable. It was annoying and rather taxing to sort through all the collective gifts he received, but sadly, it wasn't in the pile as she had hoped. So, with the ideal excuse, she waited until the figure vanished from his room, perhaps informing every pony that he was okay. She was plagued by thoughts of several bad outcomes from her desperate attempt to get the alicorn amulet when the blonde emerged from the hospital smiling and carrying a saddlebag. Her anxieties were somewhat allayed. It had to be in that bag, and she would only be able to see what was inside if she slipped in while he was sleeping. The target was sound asleep, but something still seemed dangerous to her, and only years of responding to even the smallest hint of danger prevented her from having her head crushed by another pony's hoof. So here she was, standing in front of the saddlebag, hopefully holding the piece of the alicorn amulet. The blow echoed off the ground as the assailant struck her with a kick with his hind hooves that barely touched her. He was positioned awkwardly, standing on just one hoof, in an attempt to deal her such a devastating blow. He's good, she thought briefly as he straightened up to stand on all four hooves and stared back at her with defiant blue eyes. He charged at her, perhaps hoping to finish the fight with a single, decisive blow, but each hoof he launched was skillfully sidestepped or deflected, demonstrating that patience was not one of his strong points. He would eventually overextend himself, making it vulnerable to a swift jab into the outstretched joint. There was a tiny crack as the attacker retreated in an attempt to take a defensive stance, but she would not have any of it. He was blinded by her movement as her cloak flew upwards and a metal-covered wing sprang forth, but it was too late for him to put up any defenses before her head crashed into his. With a swift flick of her wing, she sent metallic feathers flying forward at the now losing attacker, causing him to trip over his hind hooves. Then, with the speed of a Pegasus, she pressed the metallic wing against his throat, sending him hurtling backward. "Please don't make me do this. All I want is the amulet, and then I'll be on my way." She had no real reservations about him, even though he was vicious in his fight and nearly killed her. Consequently, she was shocked when he vanished in a cloud of smoke, but she was even more shocked when a hoof smashed her head into the concrete below. It was softer than before, but it was still strong and painful enough to knock her out as Naruto examined the loser and swiftly restrained her with the room's curtains after examining the metallic wing, which was merely a weapon the Pegasi used for combat when aerial battles were necessary. A tiny pool of blood trickled from the final blow. She was lying limp on the floor, so taking it off wasn't difficult. The thief promptly went back to his prior task after being restrained. This general location was perfect for any village in the nation of Zebraca because it was close to an abundant water supply and a rainforest that seemed to stretch for miles, with an abundance of different fruits, flowers, insects, and fungi to survive on. For the tiny village of Zekru, it was a paradise, but this paradise was under attack. The night sky was illuminated by a blue light, and the air was heavy with the smell of burnt flesh and smoke. A few figures screamed in agony as they frantically attempted to put out the flames by rolling in the dirt and patting each other down. However, nothing appeared to put out the flames because the small bank of water they were close to presented another issue that was almost as dangerous as the flames themselves. Now that the majority had fallen to the ground, it was only a matter of time. If one were to look at the village right now, it appeared that not a single person would survive the night, and with the forces working against the small, charming village, things weren't looking good for any villager today. As charred corpses occasionally crackled and one of the elders' wails roared from the water behind him, a lone figure watched with a look of fascination and disgust. As water filled his lungs, the zebra gasped and struggled to rise to the surface. He was pulled back under, and his flailing only served to sap his strength, making the escape somewhat short-lived. The figure asked in a cold, heartless tone, "Where did you tell that zebra to take that piece of the amulet?" He didn't feel particularly thrilled about torturing his enemy today. It had to be a specific one that gave him a sense of happiness or possibly euphoria. Even though the young zebra's corpses were scattered all around him, this elderly zebra was rather uninteresting. His terrified and angry expression almost gave him a sinister appearance. However, his fighting prowess was not equal to the fire in the zebra's eyes, and the lone figure defeated the chief without a single inch of movement. The zebra choked out, "I'll never tell you." He was submerged under the water once more, his lungs tightening as he tried to hold his breath, water slowly filling his throat. Before long, he was choking on the water that he had treasured so much. Just hours before, he felt his opponent's covert weapon encircle his neck, and it ended with a loud snap. Whether he cooperated or not, the elder's fate was virtually predetermined, and he was now just another number on the body count. The elderly body was being gently dragged downstream by the current as it floated upward, and the figure said indifferently, "You're right, you won't." The figure slowly turned his head to look at the forest, wondering if his partners were doing their share of the work. A frown formed on his face as he slowly turned back toward the few surviving figures who were making their way feverishly toward the river. He knew that cleaning his fur from the burn marks would be extremely inconvenient. As the occasional snap of a branch shattered through the thick fauna, shadows danced across the jungle. The sound itself prompted the figures to change course and move in the direction of the source. As their bodies charged through the jungle, 17 sets of amber eyes shone through the darkness, each mouth snarled as they came to a stop at what they thought was their target, an empty clearing. As the target stepped calmly into the clearing, their eyes darted to one another as another snap reverberated behind them. A hiss erupted from each of their throats, but none of them was willing to jump on it. The figure said irritably, "She's not here, fan out, and find him before she escapes this jungle." The largest of the 17 figures moved forward, its eyes rolling like a serpent. The lone figure was twice the size of the creature, making the size difference between them astounding. Its pearly white fangs were still exposed to the figure despite their disproportionate height, and the occasional beam of moonlight made them shine. After that, another figure moved forward, and finally the entire group appeared prepared to attack the newcomer. 3,000 bits, that's how much your boss is going to make off this joint venture deal. And myself, well, I intend on making my boss happy, so how about we both cooperate for your sake? The creatures took another step forward, blinking in bewilderment, unaware of the pointless threat. The only response he received was a growl as he raised his clawed hand in the air, saying, "I suppose I need to reinforce this lesson, don't I?" Knowing exactly what the flame would do to any of the figures if it touched them, it set its thumb on fire, forcing them to retreat. A bullet of flame shot forward and wrapped itself around the group's smallest figure, hissing in agony for almost 3 seconds before collapsing to the ground dead. The tainted night air filled his lungs as he blew on to the soul digit. The creature's eyes were now filled with fear, and they all felt like they were going to die because they knew that if they didn't achieve their objective, this creature would kill them. Now go search for that zebra. As the 16 figures stood by themselves, the words, which promised pain for any failure on their part, dispersed into the rainforest. The ominous creature remained silent as he looked up and saw a brown-eyed, defiant zebra staring back at him. Slightly bigger than the largest of that stupid crew he sent off, it stood impressively on its hind hooves. She was probably concealing a number of other tools to make his organs an ornamental feature of the landscape, as evidenced by the large wooden spear resting on one front hoof while the other helped level him out on the tree branch. Speaking of ornamental pieces, the second piece to the alicorn amulet was in front of him, and he couldn't help but smile menacingly at the red gem that hung dangerously around her neck to let the zebra know that it wasn't impressed by the show and intimidation it was putting on. The serpent-like creature took a slow step forward. "I wonder how long it would take for me to incinerate your body 1 inch at a time." He laughed as the spear was hurled in his direction with the intention of impaling him immediately. He puckered his lips quickly and whistled sharply, and a cylinder of flame quickly erupted from the tips of both of his lips, turning the spear into ashes. The zebra that was almost within hoof range let out a terrifying war cry as a curved blade suddenly swung from nowhere and slammed into the beast's body. Ending the moment of blindness, the mare's expression gradually changed to one of satisfaction as it gazed intently at the spot where she had struck. The blade was lodged between the beast's scales, and the blow could have easily killed the animal. The drake said, "Bravo, effective misdirection coupled with an intense attack that would kill a lesser creature. Be still, my beating heart. If you were a drake, I'd think I'd force myself onto you by now, but alas, you're just a zebra, not a bad-looking one at that, mind you. I'm just not into that interspecies thing." He didn't even notice the blade between his scales. In fact, it appeared that he was delighted that she had struck him, which was probably her final blow. Also, your mechanism was wonderfully done, using your body posture to hide the blade as you used the hoof to sell yourself, and the flick of your tail to activate the intended effect. Sheer genius. As it lowered its clawed digits onto the blade, releasing itself from its confines, and then snatched it from the zebra, his voice was anything but soothing. "Since you actually dealt a blow against me, I guess it would be cordial to introduce myself to you. I am Fire Draka, the last of the fire drakes, and the last thing you'll see tonight." He brought the zebra to Fire's eye level by firmly grasping its throat with his right claw. The mare's eyes were watering as she gazed into its icy eyes, which were filled with anger and fear because death was all that was promised. His hold on her throat didn't change, but each digit gradually started to heat up. She quickly flailed against the intense heat that threatened her. It was ineffective, though, because his hold was like that of a vice, and the psychotic drake's patience wore thin when her head burst into a ball of blue flame, leaving behind a smoking headless zebra and the legendary fragment of the alicorn amulet that fell to the ground between him and the smoking corpse. The accursed leader of that pack of animals darted past him with the object between its teeth before he could even reach for it. Another figure entered the clearing slowly, his partner in this endeavor temporarily. He gave the figure a menacing smile as it gazed at him fearlessly, saying, "It seems that you came away rather unscathed. Unfortunate in my honest opinion. Maybe this was the only member of this foolish group that would force him to work for the gem." The figure laughed at the idea that it would take centuries to find the final piece. "Assuming you didn't already know where it was, You'll get the gem when I get my payment, Fire, and besides it's useless without the other pieces. I'm well aware of that, and I'm sure you know where the last 2 pieces are, don't you? Was a remarkably rational statement given the previous moment. At last, the moonlight revealed an ebony dragon-like creature that, when standing upright, was roughly 10 feet in size. Its legs, which resembled tree trunks and had 4 talons growing from each foot, 3 in the front and 1 in the back, were firmly planted on the ground, and its body was slender and covered in ebony-colored scales with not a single one out of place in contrast to its menacing snake-like face. Fire's arms were gangly, thin and coiled into loops as if they were boneless, which was a little unsettling. Even his partner appeared agitated by the craziness in its azure eyes. The figure clicked his tongue at the final statement. I might know of its whereabouts, but I don't sell information without turning some sort of profit. His motivations were as obvious as the genocide they had just carried out. Fire made it clear when he placed the deal on the table in front of him. Get the last 2 pieces and I'll pay you 10 times the amount as this job. Even though 30,000 bits would make a small dent in his bank account, it would be well worth it if this creature could fulfill his boss's long-standing request. Even though his master had a sharp mind, the years had not been kind to him, and he was unable to recall everything. However, this amulet would change all of that and more. Do we have a deal? Why, I believe we do. In fact, some of my best workers are actually retrieving the piece that was so wrongfully stolen from me. The figure laughed. The enigmatic figure turned to its companion and grinned, saying, and even if they don't bring it back, I'm sure the message will be loud and clear, and a wonderful meeting at the Alicorn's Eye will happen. Bobo, get the twins. I believe that they'll be of use to me real soon. For the past hour, Naruto had been staring at his prisoner. Unless he was obviously recuperating from life-threatening wounds, the sun's rise always roused him in some way. He didn't sneak a peek at the enigmatic Pegasus that had made such an effort to rob him, so this time wasn't well spent. If she hadn't been so distracted by his clone, she might have also gotten away with it. After retrieving the trinket, he placed it on the floor in front of her. When the unconscious Pegasus started to stir, Naruto prepared himself for something he tried to avoid. Interrogation. He wanted answers and was going to get them today. Naruto disregarded the glare his prisoner was giving him. To be honest, she should be relieved not to be in a Canterlot jail cell because he was considerably kinder than the other inmates. The first thought that came to her was, so this amulet, is it valuable or something? She had no idea what it was or how much it was worth, aside from the fact that it was missing the most crucial component, the jewels. She responded, blowing one of the few strands that were hanging loose from her cloak, it's none of your business. Naruto said, I think it became my business when you tried stealing it from me. The thief winced at the statement, which was strange given her line of work. With a quick snap of her eyes, the thief begged the unicorn's source of decency, saying, I was just trying to get it back. I accidentally gave it to you and all I'm doing is getting what's rightfully mine. He appeared to be thinking about what she was saying as she saw his eyes soften while he stared at her. As he looked at her, Naruto asked, then why give it to me? He had already made up his mind and only needed a few more explanations before he would release her. She was a good mare who had made a mistake, and he wasn't one to condemn her for this one instance. He watched as she muttered something under her breath and then turned back to face his inquisitive gaze. Because I didn't have a choice at the time. You were a mistake, she stated with such conviction, as if she were speaking from personal experience. That amulet is bad news. Trust me when I say this, it's better that you give it to me and we go our separate ways. He looked at her as if he understood, but perhaps it was wishful thinking on her part. Things like this, don't go away unicorn, they might just stop annoying you for a while, but it'll return, it always does. I know. Before he could finish, a recognizable Pegasus barged through the window. A yellow Pegasus grinned and draped her wing over Naruto, who was struggling to think of something to say. Knock, knock, knock. Whoa, wait a minute now, I didn't think you had it in you, Naruto, and I especially didn't think that you were into that sort of thing. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. To whom had she given the amulet? Spitfire, as in the captain of the Wonderbolt Spitfire? With such ease, Spitfire said, yep, that is me, but the question is what's your name? No wait, I'm pretty sure. I don't want to know the name of the mare who Naruto ruts on a regular basis. The 2 other occupants blanched at the implications of her statement. She was shocked to hear, look Spitfire, you tell her unicorn, shouldn't Spitfire be a little more professional when handling paperwork or leading the Wonderbolts? It's Naruto, and secondly we're not rutting, Spitfire. He wasn't sure if he should go back to bed and act as though nothing had happened or go to Octavia's and wait for this to pass until the conversation was long forgotten. Spitfire remarked, so did you kidnap her or are you holding her hostage? Because you know both isn't really a good idea. You know being in the castle. Naruto gazed at her, probably doubting her and the Wonderbolt's sanity. Fine, what did she do? You would think that after the whole Nightmare Moon incident, he would be grateful that she was spending time with him. Fortunately, they saw that she was working during that incident and granted her a little more time off. She tried to steal from me. I beat and restrained her before going back to bed. With her wing tickling her nose and the mare frantically attempting to bite her, Spitfire whistled as she gazed down at the thief. She looked at the mare with orange eyes and said, "Seriously, not even a day out of the hospital and already attracting trouble. It's like you have no off days." The mare's appearance was somewhat familiar, but she had seen a lot of ponies, so this could just be another one of those faces. So what are you going to do about her? Naruto watched as Spitfire shrugged, looking shocked by his admission and unsure of how to respond. Let her go, I guess. So she isn't going to rob you then? As the magenta eyes stared down at him, trying to convey that it was a terrible idea, Naruto said. She might, I mean, I'm not giving her the object she came for. I know what I'm doing. Spitfire shook Naruto's head and remarked, speaking of knowing, don't you think she looks familiar, Naruto? I can't put my hoof on it, but it's like I've seen this mare once or twice before. Look, please give it back to me if it helps. My name is Daring Do. Her name alone had transformed the situation with those two words. The room fell silent after the brief introduction, and the restrained Pegasus, who had just disclosed one of the greatest secrets of her brief life, felt uneasy. This entire ordeal had not allayed her fears of being apprehended by anything other than a unicorn adept at hoof-to-hoof combat. So Daring hoped they would take the words to heart and perhaps comply with her request. Her throat constricted as Spitfire's attention appeared to have shifted away from the subject of her being Daring Do and towards something else. This caused her hopes to center on Naruto, who appeared to be internally debating if his twisted facial expressions were any indication. Naruto couldn't decide whether he was saddened that Daring Do, the mare whose books he had read twice, was attempting to rob him because she had made a mistake, or if this was one of the coolest things that had ever happened to him. Although he didn't know what Spitfire thought of the mare, he knew he could trust her to some extent, even though it appeared she hadn't told him everything about the amulet yet. He didn't necessarily believe her when she introduced herself as Daring Do, but the look in her eyes convinced him. It was easy for him to tell that she felt conflicted telling them that she was the renowned treasure hunter. As Daring's magenta eyes gazed at him, doubting his motives, Naruto said, Spitfire, do you mind releasing her? As Sunset bent down to release the Pegasus, she remarked, I'm not too big on this idea, but it's not my room. In a matter of seconds, Daring Do rose to her hooves, unrestrained by the curtain. Although Naruto was unsure of his feelings toward the mare who attempted to rob him, he was fairly certain that she looked the part. Starting at black, the grayscale hair gradually faded to lighter shades until it reached a uniform shade of gray. The mare slowly stretched in front of them, beginning to resemble the Pegasus, and a light gold wing flopped out, stretching to get used to its newfound freedom. She kept the other wing tucked next to her barrel, but it was heavily bandaged. He dismissed the fact that she lacked the pit helm and the distinctive khaki jacket he had seen in the stories as something that might attract more attention to her when she attempted to sneak into the castle. Ignoring the look she gave him in his peripheral vision, he lowered his gaze to her flank, which was exactly as the book described, a kind of compass rested there. Her wing froze as it attempted to reach for the amulet piece, an orange hoof holding it down, her eyes meeting an unamused Naruto as he forcefully made it retract, or face a crippling injury for any Pegasus. Thank you, I'm glad to see you understood the gravity of the situation. I'll just take that and be on my way. I thought that meant I let you go. I never said take my stuff. Now can we talk about this thing and some other important things too? Gauging the blonde, Daring asked, what do you want to know? Naruto recalled her first book and all the actions she took to thwart a Huizodal at every turn. Okay, first, why is Daring Do? If you were her, trying to rob me. Last time I checked she was one of the good guys, you know, purveyor of justice and stuff. As she turned away, Daring snarled, I am Daring Do, and I'm robbing you because I thought it was going to be much easier than this. As the Wonderbolt captain leaned over him and stole a few glances at the alicorn amulet, Naruto questioned, what is so important about this stupid thing? As she eyed the amulet, Daring Do said reverently, it's called the alicorn amulet and is nothing but trouble. It drives all of the people that adorn it insane. History has proven that time and time again. Her tone changed to one of resolve, as though she firmly believed what she was saying. This thing destroyed loves when it was complete and in the wrong hooves, so if I get it incomplete, I'm going to stow it away to somewhere that no pony would ever find it. Not really believing the Pegasus, Spitfire asked curiously, do you even know where to find another piece to it? No, but I know someone in Rome that does. If any pony needed information, he'd be the pony to go to. Spitfire, do you want to go to Rome with me? Naruto asked, observing the Pegasus's obvious smile in response. As she held back from screaming at the unicorn that was now leaving the room, Daring objected, saying, "You seriously can't mean to be going there just because I told you about my contact. Where are you going?" As she smiled at the mayor, Spitfire said, "Nope, he's already made up his mind, and I for one can't think of a better way of spending my vacation time." It was clear that the adventurer was extremely irritated by the entire situation. The adventurer sighed to herself, realizing that this next book would be more difficult than she had anticipated. "And he's going to tell his friends he's going to be gone for a while. Speaking of which, we should go tell your friend that we're coming." The words were more of a request than a demand. Spitfire occasionally glanced at Daring as she filled out the letter, curious about what she was writing, but each time she was discovered, she would simply turn away while whistling. It was a small request from a contact she knew. He owed her for the bits of information she'd given him to launch his small business, so in her honest opinion, any information he had to provide about the amulet was definitely getting away with it. In fact, out of all the ponies on her relatively short list of contacts, he was probably the best source of information she knew, and the most hands-on. The showboat was always up for an adventure if the situation called for it, but he would never abandon her. The two of them had a strong sense of loyalty, particularly in their respective fields of work where they were largely dependent on one another for revenue. If Daring hadn't known she couldn't defeat Naruto by surprising him and not wanting to see how she would hold up against a Wonderbolt in a fight, she would have tried to knock them out cold and been halfway across Equestria by now. "We're finished here. Let's get those tickets and go." Daring couldn't help but sulk. Spitfire suppressed a smirk as she observed the rather stiff mare observing the crowd from a distance. The Pegasus, at the very least, had a keen sense of avoiding ponies and being ignored in general. Spitfire inquired curiously, "So how long do you think it'll take for your friend to get it?" She hadn't been particularly fond of the notion that Daring Do was strolling beside her. It might have been a lie, but she would eventually find out. The letter was of high-quality runes, and it cost a hefty amount of bits that she could hardly afford. Daring's thoughts shifted from her esteemed contact to the question, which was not about when he would arrive but rather how long it would be before he did. In all honesty, she would be surprised if he wasn't already on his way here. She knew it had reached its destination as soon as the postal service stamped it. He's already got it. It's just a matter of how long he'll wait for us, and how he'll react to two ponies he'd never met before, especially since he's the cautious type. As she glanced absently through the crowd at a strange figure looming over the city's residents, Spitfire rolled her eyes. The question was innocent enough. "Is that a minotaur?" The Pegasus couldn't believe that such a beast would even visit a city this size, since most of them stayed with their own kind. Daring swallowed a lump in her throat as the figure's eyes met hers. A plume of air shot out of his nostrils as he started to approach them, and she felt a wave of dread. Yeah, it is." She saw the familiar shape of her opponent's muscle and said, "We should start running." Minos was a minotaur that Daring had met with on several occasions, and each encounter didn't go well for her. Only her wings and quick thinking were able to stop the massive brute of a minotaur. As the figure approached her and Daring Do, Spitfire cocked her head in their direction. Her companion's eyes were filled with what appeared to be fear and uncertainty. The massive minotaur approaching them was being partially ignored by the Canterlot crowd, which only moved aside as it approached them slowly and deliberately. The fact that the creature only had one set of hooves and glared at her companion while cracking his hands was actually rather humorous. His skin was pink, revealing muscle after muscle. The sight of its massive horns covered in a brown dusting that she could only assume was dried blood was as frightening as Soren following one of the Wonderbolt's more intense training sessions. "I honestly don't see why we should. The guards could take care of him if he tries anything, and besides, I can take him, he doesn't look too tough," Spitfire said absently as she sensed her companion's slow retreat due to a slight disturbance in the wind beside her. As the Minotaur stopped in front of them, she said, "I advise you staying. I don't want to explain why to Naruto why I had to knock you unconscious because you didn't want to face a Minotaur." Her tone changed from her usual lighthearted one to something far more serious. His voice was surprisingly high when he said, "I expected you to run, Daring." Spitfire burst out laughing at the Minotaur's expense. Her orange eyes full of amusement. Minos met her amused gaze and asked, "And what are you laughing at?" as he plucked the aviator's form from the Pegasus. When the mare beside her finally stopped laughing, Daring remained silent. Her orange eyes had turned from being full of laughter to being more playful. "Can I have my aviators back?" Daring winced as the glasses crackled in the Minotaur's hand and a sneer appeared on its face as it dropped them to the ground in front of the Wonderbolt's captain. She wasn't sure if the glasses held any sentimental significance for the Pegasus, but she now hoped that she realized how serious the situation was. He smiled at the shaky, irritated expression on the Pegasus's face and said in a high-pitched voice, "Oops." Expecting the pony to be on its way, it grinned and said, "Now run along, Pegasus. I have business to attend with this pony." As she looked at the crumpled aviators in front of her, Spitfire bit her cheek. The pair was 30 bits and had traveled all the way from Cloudsdale. To make matters worse, she saw the Minotaur turn its focus to Daring, which caused the Wonderbolt to pucker her lips in frustration. Although technically she had it coming, she could overlook the destroyed aviator, but it was insulting to completely ignore her when it was clear that she was with the archaeologist. As he swayed at the abrupt jerk of the Minotaur's head, she said sweetly, "I have a question though for such a big strong Minotaur such as yourself." She made it clear that flattery affected all living things. With its already high voice, it tried to say, "What is it?" in a rough voice that added to its humor. "Well, I myself was curious as to whether you're a male or female." "I mean if you're male I'd imagine yo." The insult remained in her mouth as she crashed through the window of the post office, her red eyes staring at her with pure hatred. With broken glass shattering beneath its hoof, the massive bovine-human hybrid stretched as it entered the post office, failing to notice the yellow blur that went by while he was tending to her sore jaw. As Daring's hoof found its way into her mouth, she narrowed her orange eyes and said, "Sheesh, you'd think you'd answer a simple question. Do you have a small d?" Her question was going through her head like herself. Daring couldn't believe how foolish one of the most well-known Wonderbolts was. It was nearly heartbreaking to consider that ponies looked up to this mare. Quit being so stupid. The hoof was swiftly removed by Spitfire. Spitfire's voice was low as she waited for the mare to make any kind of gesture. "Yeah, but I have one quick question. Every pony here saw that here, right? Me being hit?" She said the slight nod was all she really needed to let loose in public, and she smiled at it. The Wonderbolt crashed into the Minotaur, sending him crashing into the shattered glass as her hoof landed squarely across his forehead. The Minotaur shifted in rage as it tried to leave the building. The crunch could hardly be heard over the cries that filled the post office, and the only thing the Minotaur could do when it failed to pick himself up was gasp for air. The obnoxious Pegasus now stood over him, and the Minotaur's devil-may-care expression had vanished, replaced by a more stern expression that it hadn't anticipated. "Wow, you're awake after that?" Orange eyes gazed down at the recuperating Minotaur while her wings motioned for him to stand up, but she made an unsuccessful grab attempt. A hoof quickly stamped on his stomach in response to his unsuccessful attempt, causing bile to shoot out of his mouth. "Yeah, you're done. I'll get a guard to handle this." Before hopping to the ground, Spitfire's hoof shot out, slamming into the Minotaur's face, causing a small groan of pain as its eyes reeled into the back of his head. The crowd only witnessed a blur of movement from the Pegasus before she slammed her hoof into the Minotaur. Daring was only able to observe with fascination and mild horror as one of her rival's most powerful and competent minions was methodically defeated by the Wonderbolt, and it appeared that she was still being gentle with him, her. If she had any doubts about the Pegasus after seeing the Wonderbolt's feat of strength and speed, they vanished quickly, especially with Naruto by her side. Daring may have felt for the first time that she wasn't the underdog in this situation because she was clearly the one with a stronger hand to oppose him and his motley crew. Getting by was fine, but winning outright was satisfying in and of itself. With one eye swollen shut, a large bleeding gash above the other, and parts of his coat and mane partially burned, Naruto tried to glare at the Pegasus seated next to him. In other words, his friends and teacher did not take his departure well. Spitfire's sing-song tone did nothing to lift Naruto's spirits. Someone got his flank handed to him. As she watched the unicorn, Daring remarked, "I don't understand. You said you'd be fine talking to your friends. You'd convince them that this was the good for Equestria. I don't think you should come with us in your injured state." Additionally, she didn't rely on others unless she bartered with them because she didn't think his allies could do something like this to a friend. Naruto looked away, his hoof reaching for his swollen eye and instantly retracting at the slightest touch, sending a ripple of pain through him. "It isn't that bad. I'll say by tonight I'd be looking much better. The eye still might be a little swollen though." His head was still rattling from that blow, so he was genuinely curious if Celestia held back. If so, that was a frightening thought. She didn't like it when he casually mentioned that he was leaving the country to search for an amulet of mass destruction, and even though she insisted that he stay, he politely declined as he was leaving. Naruto honestly believed he was off the hook, but the princess gave him a brief jab that made her position on the matter very apparent. Octavia's cut was only superficial. She had struck him well with the bow because he had interrupted her, but she made no effort to change her mind when he told him what she was doing, only confiding in him to get home safely. Naruto surmised that Octavia was aware of his intention to proceed with or without her approval. He simply wanted to confide in her. In contrast, Naruto was still a little afraid of seeing her anytime soon. The look she gave him when he told her was the stuff of nightmares. In fact, he felt like he was ready to fight Nightmare Moon again because of how angry she was. He was grateful that he only suffered minor burns because she had stated that she would use those fireballs in a creative way, and he had a partial fondness for every part of his body, especially the one that made him a stallion. That's impossible. No pony can heal that fast unless they were an earth pony. Spitfire grinned as she punched Naruto, drawing a swift glare directed at the Pegasus. Nah, Naruto's like a super unicorn or something. I can vouch for that, and I know I've done worse to him. She knew from personal experience that a Huizodal was a vicious killer who cared as much for any pony's life as he did for what the world thought of him, which was very little. Well, I still insist that he doesn't come. He's still recovering from the hospital, and I know that a Huizodal isn't a force to be taken lightly. He'll rip you apart with his bare hands if he gets a hold of you. Even though the unicorn appeared prepared to face danger, she held herself accountable for a number of things and didn't think Naruto would return alive if she allowed him to go on this adventure. Naruto said bitterly, "Daring, either I go with you or you can try to take the amulet from me. Either way I can promise you that I'm staying on the train." Since she defeated the monkey-cat hybrid and he defeated her while he was still recuperating from his fight with Nightmare Moon, he was technically stronger than a Huizodal. Spitfire put her wing around Naruto and said, "You should listen to him, because either you'll be on the ground knocked out or enjoying me telling Naruto about the summer sun celebration and how Fleetfoot did leading the group." Daring pondered the possibility of attacking Naruto at that precise moment. It couldn't be too difficult to obtain the amulet from him, but the action smacked of dread as the two conversed politely about one another. It seemed as though they were expecting her to try, which she was still thinking about despite their friendly conversation. They still saw her as a threat, which gave Daring a slight sense of relief and mistrust as the train started to move. "I'm going to check on the next cart." Naruto nodded as he watched her go out of the corner of his eye. He was still unsure of how to handle the situation, even though he thought the next few days would be easy. Even though he thought it would be, a small doubt had been sown in his mind as he watched Daring hesitate about trying to take it from him. Was this amulet more than just a weapon, as she was letting on? If so, he hoped she wouldn't discover the elements of harmony he brought with him, as he imagines that they wouldn't be the only thing he would have to watch out for if he did. Naruto glanced at his friend once more, and he was a little relieved that she had chosen to accompany him on the trip despite foregoing her vacation time. Even though Spitfire was occasionally jovial and carefree, he knew that when things got tough, the mare was as strict and cunning as they came. Even more so than a unicorn with a fire weapon that would threaten to burn him alive the next time she saw him. As the two prepared for the adventure ahead, Spitfire smiled at the unicorn and the blonde nodded in agreement. "Next time we get off we're going to be in Rome, land of the sheep and tales of creatures of old. I'm now kind of glad that I barged in on you today." Both were eager to spend some quality time together, even if he wasn't aware of it yet. After 5 days, Rome. Daring waited with her two friends while they got used to their new surroundings. They had arrived late that evening, and despite their apparent energy, they weren't night ponies as she had previously thought. Therefore, it was decided that rather than traveling through the streets, they would stay at the closest hotel and travel to their destination in the morning. She was completely taken aback when Naruto rented the best room in the building for the three of them to share, then claimed the couch for his own place to sleep. He fell asleep almost immediately after creating one clone, which nearly as shocked her as the fact that Naruto appeared completely unharmed aside from the tiny scorch marks that were still visible on his coat. Spitfire flopped on the bed, groaned as she shuffled on it a little, and then retreated to higher ground, sleeping contentedly amid the hanging emerald gem chandelier. The explorer was genuinely surprised by Spitfire's frequent approach to the topic of mating, which caused Naruto to blush profusely. This implied that the 4-star bed was set aside specifically for her, leading Daring to think that these might be the most peculiar ponies she had ever encountered. They had slept in rather late, and when she unexpectedly began to wake the first one, it was almost lunchtime. If she were to venture a small guess about her latest adventure, her informant would probably be quite vocal and the days ahead would be busy, as her lone wing trembled to release any cramps that might have tried to form up on her. As Spitfire rolled out of the chandelier and fell to the ground, the adventurer winced and closed her eyes, anticipating the dull thud to reverberate throughout the room. Her head craned as the slight shift of the chandelier alerted Daring that Spitfire was awakening. Her wings folded back into position as she blinked at the wonderbolt smacking her lips in the exact spot where she was standing upright. A moment later, her eyes peeked open. Daring didn't want to think about how much training the wonderbolt had to undergo in order to correct herself when she fell to the ground half asleep. The sound of the falling water and her terrible singing filled the suite as the golden-coated Pegasus hurried to the shower, leaving the door open. The biggest clue that Naruto was about to get up was that the clone would wistfully pop into nothing. She had witnessed this happen frequently on the train to the city. She ignored the fact that the bathroom was in use as she watched him slap his lips. Her body moved slowly as she was interested in how the two would respond to each other being in such a provocative state. She was aware of the Wonderbolt's enthusiastic approach to the subject of mating, using innuendo whenever she appeared bored or believed it was suitable for the topic at hand, which was never the case. Surprisingly, she only heard the horrible singing of the Wonderbolt, whom she was losing respect for, rather than the blonde's heartfelt apologies or perhaps an invitation to join her a few minutes later. Naruto emerged, his eyes at ease as he smiled at her, though she wasn't sure if it was sincere. She would speculate that she harbored a slight fondness for Naruto because she was unsure of how to perceive him. Naruto remained an enigma to her, like a vast mystery that was just waiting to be solved. When he was awake, his nature was full of warmth and comfort that seemed to radiate from him, but there was a degree of mistrust between the two because he constantly created clones when he fell asleep and Spitfire occasionally left the train to work out her wings. Even this extravagant, screamed "look at me," his absurd healing power, and the fact that he so easily got along with one of the most well-known figures in Equestria were all things to marvel at. It wasn't subtle, but she pictured the unicorn was anything but subtle at this point. As the Pegasus stormed out of the shower, Daring sighed, clearly distracted as she slipped past them humming a song that, if she recognized it, was probably off-key. "I see that everyone's awake, and feeling refreshed, I hope." Spitfire was particularly aware of the irony as the song gradually faded from her thoughts and moved in the direction of the door. The Wonderbolt grinned and gave them a final glance before heading out of the room. "Yep. I mean, it might not have been a fancy bed or anything, but that chandelier had the sense that everything was right with the world." As he holstered the saddlebags and tightened the straps in preparation for the day, Naruto stood silently, struggling to find the right words to say. The simplest thing that came to mind at that precise moment was, "We'll be fine. Just lead the way, and we'll stop anything that tries to threaten us." Naruto didn't know how else to phrase it, but he was going to help her, that was all, and nothing would stop him. Heat rose to Daring's face in embarrassment and anger, neither of which overcame the other, and she turned her head away. Her voice betrayed her as she said, "Thanks, but that's not what I was going to ask. Is the amulet secure?" Her normally confident tone was now muffled by embarrassment, which heightened both feelings once more. He fixed his saddlebags, the jangle still visible, and said, "Yeah, it's fine, right here with everything else I brought with me." He ignored the curious look Daring nodded as the unicorn hurried through the door, leaving her by herself to consider what he had said moments before. "We should get going. I know Spitfire isn't the most patient of ponies. I'd kind of feel sorry for the receptionist if we left her with him for too long." Daring wistfully said, "Stop everything that threatens us. I wish it were that simple," as she made her way to the door, preparing herself for the inevitable betrayal she would commit after the amulet was finished. As Naruto stood leaning against the hallway with his head buried in the satchel and his muzzle buried deep within the bag, her magenta eyes were fixed on the hallway. She sincerely hoped that this wouldn't happen. She watched as he opened the aforementioned muzzle to think of something to say, his bright blue eyes bursting with shock. "What are you doing?" she asked. With his eyes darting around, Naruto said, "I was just making sure the amulet was fine. Yeah, because I saw some shifty goat pass by and stuff." Hopefully, Daring didn't confront him because this was much more difficult to explain than it should have been. He nodded quickly, and they both went silently down the stairs after noticing a bored Wonderbolt chit-chatting with two Pegasi at the front desk. Her words were hollow. "Sure, come on, your friend's waiting for you." Spitfire put her head on the reception desk and said, "So you two are identical twins, huh? That's cool. So what's your names?" With a chilly glare, Yin's sister gestured toward the stairs, interrupting her as she said, "I'm Yin and she's Yang. We are identical twins and we'd appreciate it if you actually removed your head from the counter. We like to run a clean business and whether you're..." Spitfire gestured to the receptionists who were glaring at her and said, "Thanks Celestia, you arrived. Naruto, I was getting bored out of my mind. These two here just wouldn't say anything at all." As Naruto gazed at her with a mix of surprise and caution, Daring rolled their eyes and said, "It's Uzumaki's fault. He kept his nose buried in that saddlebag, so it took him forever to find the stairs." As she led her friends out of the hotel in search of better opportunities, Spitfire remarked, "Let's just go already. I got the deposit back, and I'm hoping we get to see something that'll make this trip worth it besides the silent twins here." Ahuizotl looked idly at the drake in front of him. He found it annoying to watch his business partner chew on what he thought was turquoise, and the noise seemed to get louder with every second that went by. This had been going on for 2 days straight, and if it weren't for the absurd payday he was given, he was certain that snapping this drake's neck would have already happened. However, he was going to complete the task after he had been paid. He would get the occasional respite as the drake swallowed his food before the rattle and crunching started again. No annoyance was going to last that long, and if he pushed it the right way, it would likely earn him another paycheck, especially if the item was worth this much to his boss. As someone knocked on his door, he forgot his thoughts of betrayal and greed. As a tiger fiddled with the doorknob, Ahuizotl gestured for it to open. A few seconds later, The door opened to reveal a pair of nearly identical Pegasus pony twins. They gazed at the inhabitants with icy violet eyes while their manes hung over each of their left ears, their cutie marks. A half yin-yang symbol on their cobalt blue coat were the only obvious distinction. "I see you've both returned with good news, I presume." Ahuizotl grinned and looked down at the twins' front hooves, which were covered in block as they walked into the room and shut the door. The left one, whom Ahuizotl assumed to be Yin, said in a drab voice, "We found her and she didn't bother hiding as you presumed she would, sir." "She wasn't alone either, there were two with her," said Yang, the other sister, right away, carrying on the discussion. "One was a Wonderbolt, we confirmed that she was Spitfire." Yin watched as she fixed her gaze on her master, who was now obviously furious. As she watched the trembling fist that was poised to strike her at any second, Yang said, "The other, we know his name, that's all. He's rather an unknown to us." The twins shuddered at the cold tone. "Speak it." Nevertheless, they obeyed. The twins yelled, "Naruto Uzumaki." As they recoiled in anticipation of another beating from their master, what they got was more terrifying than any punishment or beating they had ever received, and their master's guest's boisterous laughter filled the room. His eyes gleamed with what the two ponies suspected was madness, and his scaly claws clapped vigorously as his laughter grew louder, a dog or two sticking out over his lower lip. As the Fira's gaze focused on him, Ahuizotl yelled, "Do you want to laugh like a crazy person or do you want to share the source of your amusement?" The Drake would occasionally giggle during his digression, which caused some of the room's occupants to look scared. "I just find it rather appropriate that one of those ponies my master so vehemently wants disposed of is right here. It's as if the fate has decided to give me an extra prize for my diligence. Kill him and you can guarantee yourself a large substantial bonus, perhaps as big as your initial reward if you bring me his severed head." The monkey-cat hybrid felt a pit of discomfort in its stomach as a result of the words. He had already massacred a small village just a week prior, so killing had become second nature to him by this point. However, this was different. Even by his standards, the large reward for a single head was absurd. He carefully stated, "Why pay so much for one measly pony's head? One insignificant ant shouldn't pose a threat to your master." He had to understand why he was such a valuable target without overtly becoming more involved with this insane Drake. "Oh, there are plenty of reasons alone for him to be considered a threat in these past 3 years, so I hope you will eliminate him along with anything else you deem fit for the task at hand." Ahuizotl said, "Another nuisance to add to the list, alongside a Wonderbolt and Daring Do. Tell everyone involved that when they spring the trap, make sure you push them in the water. I can handle the rest." The twins nodded and departed once more to complete their assignment. It would only take a few seconds for them to engage in combat. Once they fell into the river, it would be over. A velvet-coated Pegasus swept her wings over the shelves, wiping dust from the collection of books that hadn't been touched in ages, while the stagnant smell of dust and old paper filled the small shop. The unicorn never knew when to stop asking ponies for favors, especially when it involved that mare, but she also had the slightest soft spot for her husband, whom she hated for making such a simple request while he was deep in his research. Unfortunately, it wasn't effective on other important matters, mostly his loving family, but it was doubly effective in motivating him because he was both interested in this favor. When the doorbell rang, she didn't need to look down because a 5-year-old Pegasus filly was running through the store. Instead, her gaze was fixed on another shelf. She shifted awkwardly up towards her voice full of cheers. Even though the little accomplishment was impressive, her daughter's tiny sparkle indicated that she had a secret to share. Her words, "Mommy," were barely audible over the door opening, and her caramel eyes were filled with a familiar sight as Daring Do entered the doorway. It was understandable why her filly was so excited. As the filly dive-bombed the renowned explorer, sending her to the ground, a smile appeared on her face. The older pony showered her with what she assumed was more affection, given how joyful she had been moments before. Her eyes blinked a second time as 2 more ponies entered. She recognized them right away. Spitfire, the current Wonderbolt's captain, and Naruto Uzumaki, whom she particularly liked for certain reasons. They both stood in awe of what was happening. The mother pursed her lips at the fleeting thought of Daring asking for help, but the idea was quickly dismissed. She was aware that Daring had been pursuing her goals alone at first and that it had taken some persuasion from her and her spouse to prove that Daring was unable to handle everything by herself. She genuinely thought the mare was aware of it, but she didn't care because she thought her good deeds outweighed any negative consequences. As the 3 of them turned to face the Pegasus, she said sweetly, "Welcome to our humble shop." The 3 slowly relaxed as the Pegasus gestured for the filly to close the door. "I believe introductions are in order. You may call me Quick Quill, or Q if you feel like it. My husband will be out shortly. I'm sure he knows you 3 are already here." As the Pegasus floated down toward her, Daring grinned. Despite earlier warnings about her adventures, it was comforting to know that she was still trusted. Daring felt a little lighter even from the filly's actions. The knowledge that she was somewhere safe relieved some of her burdens. She only wished that this sense of contentment could fix her wings because she imagined that things would be different right now. As her lone wing caressed the filly's head lovingly, she cooed, "It's good to see you, Q, and I've seen little Hazel has grown since the last time I saw her. These are my co-workers Naruto Uzumaki and Spitfire, captain of the Wonderbolts." She said the words as if they didn't have the weight she wanted them to have in order to deceive her 5-year-old daughter and what was likely the nicest mare she had ever grown accustomed to. "County workers, lies you're about as social as your parents and grumpier than both of them combines, so if you're going to lie to Hazel, do it about something less irrelevant." As Hazel moved away from her side and toward the voice's owner, the words echoed throughout the bookstore. A unicorn with a messy navy blue coat and a black and white mane hanging over his striking scarlet-red eyes stepped forward, filling the air with the scent of mint and oranges. Crescent Lullamoon was the stallion of the moment and one of the few ponies who gave a damn about what was going on in the world. Daring knew it wasn't a suggestion from the way he said, "Dear, I think it's going to take a while. Do you think you could take out Hazel for a bit? I'm sure you both could do with some fresh air." She ushered the filly out, leaving the four alone, confident that Q picked up on it. Daring blinked in shock as she saw cards come to life, pouring from the bookshelves and hovering dangerously in the air with a sunny yellow hue. Her companions were instantly on edge, getting ready for battle as the mass of cards swirled above them. The words were confused. "What are you doing? Even if it was a lie, they still are on our side, Crescent." "I know that, but I don't know where to start with my findings on the amulet. I'm sure you know a great deal about the subject, Daring, considering the circumstances, but I've only had no more than say a week dealing with this particular subject." Crescent grinned and pointed to the cards as they gradually came together to form a tangible shape, more precisely, a book. Naruto gazed at the unicorn that was manipulating cards. He had previously encountered it, but he was unsure of its location. The question was straightforward enough. "We've met before, haven't we?" The older unicorn nodded appreciatively, confirming his suspicions. The unicorn placed the book of cards on the ground and said, "Yes, I believe it was in Prance. I was dealing with a few gargoyles or something of that sort. I exhausted myself. You came to my rescue and promptly defeated them with only but one attack. It was an extraordinary one too, if it didn't deal such grievous wounds to you afterwards." The statement was remarkably composed. Crescent grinned as the Pegasus dipped her head closer, sorting through the information being shared, sorting through what she knew and what she didn't. "The Alicorn amulet is essentially a tool that's existed longer than Equestria was founded. If I was a betting stallion, and I am, it's likely that this was one of the reasons that a huge rift was created between the three pony tribes." As Spitfire looked over the enthralled Pegasus, a picture that was now clearly visible on the page, she asked, "So what's so evil about it?" It depicted a deranged-looking earth pony being burned at the stake with a recognizable necklace around its neck while ominous red eyes gazed at the throng. He saw Daring Do bite her cheek before turning away and returning her attention to Naruto. "As you can see by the picture, it corrupts those that dare to wear it. All tribes of pony kind are affected by the whispers of power that come from it. Even holding a piece of it causes this descent, so I caution you all to be wary of it. It's ruined many of lives already. Each tribe receives 3 pieces, and the amulet's centerpiece, a large gem, enhances earth pony magic. The final piece that ties everything together is intended for Pegasi, and the tiniest gem for unicorns, which you all guessed, amplify their magical powers." "What would happen if we gave it to a dragon?" Naruto inquired as to whether the amulet would aid in his summoning. "Nothing at all. It's only intended to enhance the pony's inner magic, making it just another item to add to its collection. This also applies to the individual tribes. If a Pegasus held the piece that enhances their natural magic, it would only be a decorative item. However, I'm sure that eventually, being near it will force you to finish it," the unicorn-themed card said, and he and Daring locked eyes. As she prepared herself for what lay ahead, Daring uttered, "Where's the next piece? We need to get it." "Oh, the next piece ought to be glowing on the bottom of the Tiber River," Crescent said, staring wistfully at the book as Daring and Spitfire nodded in understanding, one slightly more excited about the prospect than the other. "I'd advise heading to the Pons Fabricius. It's the oldest bridge around Rome." His eyes traipsed over Daring as she nodded in understanding. "I'm sure you're aware of this, but you're being watched, and you, my dear injured Pegasus, know who it is, so keep your destruction to a minimum," the unicorn said as he ushered the ponies out of his house, trying to rid himself of the sense of dread as he took one glance at Naruto's right saddlebag. The feeling of power that emanated off it was enticing, so it made sense that what Naruto had was obviously the Pegasus portion, or they'd all be a mess at the moment, or half of every pony present at least. So it was a phenomenal effort that Naruto was willingly repelling the whispers of power that had promised him. That unicorn was something before, but now he didn't know how to measure him as an average unicorn. Equestria certainly has gotten more interesting since I've met you, Naruto. It had been an hour, but she knew they were getting close. They remained silent as they galloped through Rome. As they got closer to the bridge, Daring led the group, swerving to avoid the occasional citizen. 8 cats stood on the large bridge in front of them, gazing intently at the throng of goats that had gathered around it as their gallops gradually faded into a slow gait. Daring scanned the group of goats and saw that they were essentially unharmed, with the exception of one goat that was bleeding over its brow. It was evident that the goats were more cautious than she had first thought. Come on, let's take care of these things. We need to take care of these things and get to that bridge. As Spitfire turned to face the group of cats that were approaching them from behind, Daring turned to look behind her and noticed the long claws scraping against stone. She could still hear her mentor's words. It was a trap, and they just sprung it. Naruto, Daring, you two go on ahead, I got these cats, Spitfire calmly said. Glancing over her shoulder at the frightening group of large cats obstructing the bridge, she no longer had the usual smile on her face. Instead, it was a mask of seriousness, devoid of any kind of humor. The adventurer looked at the goats fleeing the scene in terror as the big cats came toward them and said, You don't need to worry, we're here, Spitfire. It's just a show of force, I'm sure of it. As Naruto's horn flared up, a bolt of magic erupted from it and slammed into the biggest tiger he had ever seen, sending it crashing on its back. Daring felt a wave of relief as she watched the tiger get back up, its legs trembling with every second it wasted standing upright. Her gaze shifted to Naruto, who was preparing another blast with the tiniest hint of blue on the tip of his horn as Daring witnessed the effectiveness of the unicorn, who appeared so carefree in combat. In fact, her victory seemed a little more playful than this. She felt a knot in her throat. What had caused this? As he launched another energy-charged bolt forward, Naruto muttered, Arc. The bolt's shape changed in midair, turning from a single bolt to an arch that struck the group of cats on the bridge. The group glared at him as they all sprawled backwards, minor burns covering them all. The effect imminent. He heard Daring's little gasp as 4 jaguars lunged forward, their eyes blazing, the first leaping toward Naruto with its claws outstretched. Determined to kill him, the jaguar's fight was effectively over when he took a step forward and slammed his hoof into the cat's head, sending it crashing into the stone bridge. The other jaguars hesitated as they witnessed their ally being eliminated with such efficiency, but their hasty advance signaled the end of their involvement in the fight as Spitfire crashed down on 2 of the jaguars, her hooves smashing into their skulls and sending them crashing into the stone bridge. Without pausing for a second, Naruto unleashed another beam of magic that impaled itself on the remaining jaguar, causing it to stumble to the ground with the layer of magic still in its throat as blood dripped from it, ending the cat's life with an all-too-familiar gleam in her eyes as she gazed down the final 4 cats. Spitfire swiftly moved back to her original position. Spitfire remarked, The old codger helped us after all. Daring turned to look behind her, gasping at the sight of the cats who had attempted to ambush them from behind but were now restrained with several playing cards. As the 4 surviving cats readied themselves for an impending conflict, something felt wrong. Even though the 7 cats behind them had successfully dealt with the situation, it seemed as though they were merely delaying rather than truly stopping them. As the cats now waded across the bridge, she said absently, Naruto, something feels off. As Naruto gazed at the rippling water below, a familiar presence approached him and he said, I know how you feel, it's like they're waiting for something. He was certain that the amulet piece was in the water as the cats parted ways. Allowing another figure to approach the bridge, his gaze returned to the cats. Anger swept over the daring Pegasus as a Huizotl stepped forward, and Daring instantly recognized him. As the cats roared in fear at the 3, he had a menacing smile on his face. As he flexed his tail, the hand at its tip giving them the middle finger, each second seemed to drag on for a minute as the hybrid came to a halt in the center of the bridge. Another fragment of the amulet hung from his neck as his eyes darted to the Wonderbolt. They all braced themselves for an attack. We meet again, Daring, and I see you've brought friends this time, and one of them is a Wonderbolt. What a pleasant surprise, a Huizotl said. As the 3 watched with sardonic looks, he yelled, I wish to offer you your lives for the piece of the amulet you have. A Huizotl looked at Daring Do and said, I see that you don't wish to cooperate, so that leaves me no choice but to eliminate you then. The Pegasus was a little nervous as Naruto undid the saddlebag straps for the first time since he and Daring embarked on the adventure. The weighted leather fell to the ground with a dull thud as Naruto moved forward, leaving the objects exposed. Get it? A Huizotl's words provided the cats with the motivation they needed to charge forward, swerving to avoid the stray bolts that Naruto threw forward in a desperate move. Daring grabbed the saddlebags between her teeth and fled the approaching battle. As the four cats hurried past the two, Naruto fixed his gaze on the actual danger on the bridge. He had faith in Daring and knew she would save the left saddlebag for him. The blonde asked, "Spitfire, you got them right?" While a Huizotl stood smiling across the bridge and the Wonderbolt nodded in agreement in his periphery. He said cautiously, with a hint of bravado, "I'll handle him then." He hoped he wouldn't have to go to such extreme lengths to defeat his opponent because he wasn't sure he would want to return to Canterlot after suffering injuries as severe as a week earlier. "Bolt," he muttered to himself, and a magical bolt sped from the tip of his horn toward a Huizotl's chest. Striking it squarely, the creature stood unfazed by the attack, and the only indication that it had hurt him was the tiny burn mark on its chest. The creature's face turned into a menacing smile as it moved forward, laughing as it did so as Naruto skidded toward the bridge's railing. The hand on its tail struck him hard in the side. The ominous smile deepened as he struck Naruto once more, his hand flying through the air before colliding with stone. Naruto ducked the blow and sent another magic bolt in the hybrid's direction. The bolt caused almost as much damage as Naruto had initially thought. As Naruto prepared himself in the middle of the bridge, his opponent's voice yelled, "You're going to have to do better than that if you're going to hurt me." "I could say the same for you." The Pegasus skillfully avoided a cheetah's terrifying lunges as the beast crashed into a melon stand, and Spitfire was somewhat grateful that Daring was at least as nimble as she thought. The Wonderbolt's captain found it hilarious to watch the cheetah attempt to correct itself before pursuing Daring, whom Spitfire had lost sight of at this point. While it was simple to defeat 3 of Daring's assailants, doing so cost her precious time and resulted in a new group of adversaries who were only interested in impeding her help with the grounded Pegasus. Spitfire remained silent as she stared at the twins who were in her way. She found it annoying that they were always as fast as she was, especially since she knew she was faster than them. Both the twins' front hooves were equipped with claws that, if they struck her beloved wings, would immediately impair her ability to fly. This made the situation even more enraging as the two tauntingly flapped their claws, an insult to many Pegasus who thought they were better flyers. Her orange eyes narrowed as the first twin galloped forward, the hoof moving through the air where Spitfire's head had once been. She tried to retaliate, but the other Pegasus slashed her viciously, causing her right front hoof to hurt and a trickle of blood to flow. When guard was finally dropped, she retreated into the shadows to launch an attack. Spitfire's eyes hardened as she watched the Pegasus approach slowly. Her gaze moved from the self-assured Pegasus to the alleys close to her. "Young, it seems you were right. A Wonderbolt without their wings is just as useless as these goats here in Rome, and since she can't take off, she's now effectively grounded." Pegasus in the shadows only needed to wait for her to make that first error in order to defeat her. It would only be a matter of time until she made one with her sister. The Pegasus said, "Why don't you give up? It'd save your life and we get to boast about defeating an icon that many have dared to even fly with." Her orange eyes shifted downward, a gust of wind tickling her ears as she looked up to meet her opponent. She gestured with one wing at the option that seemed best for every pony present hanging in the air. "Or you can be stubborn and we kill you. We get the glory and most assuredly a large paycheck as we sell your corpse to the highest bidder," Yin said, stopping her strolling while staring at the precious Wonderbolt. "So what's it going to be?" The decision was never made quickly because the Wonderbolt darted to the left, barely avoiding impalement from behind, while the silent sister stabbed her claw into the cobblestone street below. The sister let out a whinny as she pulled to free her hoof. The action was doomed when Spitfire slammed her left hoof into the Pegasus's prone wings, causing the Pegasus to feel the agonizing pain of her wing snapping. The blood-stained right hoof was now soaked from the effort it had to make in order to assist Spitfire in slamming her left hoof into the silent sister's hoof, effectively ending any chance of flying anytime soon or perhaps ever. If the crunch was any indication, the injured Yang attempted to kill the Wonderbolt once more by taking a careless swing at her, but the Wonderbolt rolled over, bucking her other wing and free hoof with her hind hooves. Yin attempted to make sense of what she had just seen as she allowed her sister to be methodically disabled by 3 well-placed attacks, thereby eliminating any possibility that she would ever play a role in the conflict. While Spitfire watched for the real threat that she was hiding in the shadows, ready to strike at any moment, she was actually high above the ground, ready to impale her with her claws and put an end to the battle. She simply couldn't believe it. Their plan was perfect. She was supposed to lull her into a false sense of caution as she approached her, giving her a chance to escape the ongoing battle. She had just lost her beloved twin, and she had no idea how much harder this battle would be. The Wonderbolt said, "I'll take option 3. I injure you two so badly that you'll never fly again." The twins had previously heard the Wonderbolt speak in a cautious or cheerful tone. Her hind hooves were trembling, and her orange eyes fell on the unharmed twin. It was obvious what she was feeling at the time, but it didn't matter because she would experience excruciating pain in a matter of seconds. Spitfire remained motionless, feeling the throb of her injury as more blood covered her leg as she prepared for the next move. Yin took to the sky as she attempted to put as much distance between them as possible, knowing that the high ground would probably be the decisive factor in the fight and that, in her opinion, being grounded due to an injured hoof meant that she would win at some point soon. It was therefore not surprising to see the shocked and horrified expression on her face when Spitfire blasted off the ground and smashed straight into the astonished Pegasus's stomach. The battle was decided there when she grabbed the Pegasus and stopped the other twin's wings from flapping down as they both fell to the ground, with the twin acting as a cushion as gravity took over. She glided her into a wall, knocking her unconscious almost instantly because she had nothing to protect her head. The landing was gentle in comparison to what Spitfire could have done. Spitfire remained silent as she eventually released the unconscious Pegasus, her body hitting the ground with a dull thud while she observed the bottle's outcome floating in the direction of her adversary. As the Wonderbolt gazed at her, unsure of what to do next, Yang screamed, please don't take it away from her." As the Wonderbolt fell to the ground in front of Yin, the twin yelled, "I know we don't deserve mercy, but please don't take that from her. She'd rather die than give up her ability to fly." The Wonderbolt then hobbled away from the twin as Spitfire continued to limp toward her goal. The adrenaline wearing off and a wave of exhaustion washing over her, she choked out, Thank you." Her wings felt more like weights than real appendages. As he avoided another club-like blow that crashed into the bridge, Naruto stomped his hoof in frustration. His horn released another magical bolt that only left the tiniest single mark on his fur. He was beginning to worry about this question as he unleashed another magical bolt and got the same outcome despite being far weaker than Nightmare Moon. Ahuizotl was handling one of his strongest blows with ease, and he considered striking his face to be as impossible as hurting someone with a ranged weapon. He was now well aware that Ahuizotl was fundamentally slower than Naruto, but this didn't really bother him because he knew that their reflexes were only a little bit different, and that was all he needed when that enraged unicorn made a mistake. It was only a matter of time until he reached his limit and would have to rely on a retreat or more physical approach to defeat him, and that's where he'd win. The unicorn's magic fizzled out exactly as he had anticipated. Even the Drake was not privy to such knowledge. Naruto was really at the end of his rope, not with magic, but with how powerful it was against this thing, as if he were impervious to it or something. He saw that hand on Ahuizotl's tail curl back into a fist, poised to strike him at any time. It was either now or never for him to take drastic action. He saw the opening he was searching for when Ahuizotl ricocheted off the bridge, his back slamming into the rail as a look of shock fell over him. He was still unharmed by the magic, but the attack was still too serious to ignore. He took a few steps forward, letting it slam into the ground behind him as he unleashed a vicious bolt of magic point blank into his opponent's chest. With his hooves standing proudly atop the water as he searched the water for his opponent, Naruto watched as the hybrid clambered to his feet in terror and charged at him, diving into the water below with the tiniest ripples. Naruto was submerged in a new area for the battle. As Daring gazed at the charred puma corpse in front of her, she felt a tiny twinge of regret. The horrified expression on her face when that blue fireball struck, it would probably haunt her dreams for days to come. She came to a standstill because, in her excitement, she had forgotten some of Rome's details. She had come dangerously close to dying once today, but it still seemed determined to kill her. Her gaze shifted to her rescuer, a Drake, something she couldn't believe she was truly witnessing, as he approached her slowly, the talons on each hand containing the tiniest embers, which unnerved the already anxious Pegasus. He gazed at her with reptilian eyes while his uncoiling tail dragged across the floor as she watched him take a big step towards her. Daring choked out, "Thanks, but I think I should be going now." Her eyes were watering from the charred corpse that attacked her senses. She was certain she would lose this as well. The Drake stepped forward, his tail now to the left of him as it slowed his approach by drugging against the ground, and he imposed, "Please stay, I insist." Fire's eyes flashed as the fire in his hand grew larger and his smile widened. "I'm sure you know why I'm here. Now give it to me or I'll do something that would make that cat's death look tame." No matter how much trouble this amulet caused, Daring bit her lip and conceded defeat because she was sure he would kill the entire town and her allies to obtain it. Daring carefully opened the left saddlebag and, to her surprise, discovered 4 different gems that, at best, appeared to be about the size of her feather. She was certain that Naruto had been inspecting these earlier. "I don't understand," she said, pausing as she felt the fire's heat close to her hoof and staggered backward, almost dropping the bag as she bit her lip. He took another step forward and hissed, "Any second now. I'm being kind enough to spare your insignificant life and the lives of everyone in this town, so please don't test my patience." Daring sifted through the right bag and found what she was so desperately looking for, tossing it to his feet in defeat as the ground rumbled beneath her hooves. In the corner of her eye, she saw Spitfire trudge forward. The mare appeared to have seen better days as she pushed herself into the drake's back, sending her to the ground in vain while a wave of agony swept over the Wonderbolt. Daring was certain that she had been in situations where she felt more powerless to stop the bad guy from winning, but at the moment she couldn't recall a time when it seemed so hopeless. That smile, however, sent a wave of unease through Daring's body as he coiled his long tail around Spitfire's fallen form. The archaeologist watched in horror as he slipped away the piece of the amulet in one hand and Spitfire bound by his tail. As the drake vanished from view, Daring's gaze lowered and focused on the bag of gems that Naruto had brought, one of which was humming brightly. What on earth is happening? As she observed the gem vibrate and then die down and return to its initial state, she pondered with the tiniest of thoughts. She picked up the bag and left, hoping her gambit would work. Please, Ahauizotl, be as merciless as I've always thought you are. Naruto has never been good around water. In his previous life, Zabuza, he was water walking and even perished near a dam. Therefore, being dragged beneath the Tiber River did not help convince him that his slight dislike of water was not unfounded. Rather, it only made him more ready for battle as his horn grew brighter, illuminating the water as he glanced around, holding his breath in the hopes of spotting his opponent. As Naruto looked around for his opponent, it might have been the only thing he could do at the moment. Naruto's senses were unaffected by the sporadic changes in the water or passing fish. Instead, they only made him tense and made him laugh nervously. Given that the final piece of the alicorn amulet was located far below him, he was unwilling to take the chance of swimming upwards and searching for his opponent on dry land. The waiting game was now being played between him and Ahauizotl, and Naruto suspected that the hybrid cat-monkey was more patient than he would ever be. As he was dragged through the water and felt the first real shift of water pass by him, Naruto estimated that he had 3 minutes left. He was so shocked that he almost opened his mouth when he felt his opponent slam his back against the wall. His jaw snapped shut as Ahauizotl's arm encircled his neck, and he swore he could hear the laughter of that thing swimming past him once more as he dragged him towards the wall, his magic clinging to the closest thing he could think of. He felt his back slam into what he hoped was a wall, his own struggles becoming less and less as the final breath left his mouth. Naruto looked up and felt Ahauizotl's fist strike his muzzle, opening it. It's over, a combatant thought as Naruto thrashed around in the water, his eyes closed as the lake grew quiet, his vision fading as sporadic flashes of blinding magic erupted from his horn. Ahauizotl grinned as he lowered himself to examine his most recent victim, his hands encircling Naruto's neck as he slowly brought him to the surface. He paused when he sensed even the smallest movement in his opponent's throat. Ahauizotl tightened his hold, snapping the few bones in his neck, making the body vanish completely, and he couldn't blame the useless pony for trying to save his life. He swam to the surface, barely suppressing a growl, and saw Naruto standing on top of it, his horn glowing and his blue eyes covered in silver as the third piece of the alicorn amulet rested on his chest as a result of that heinous magic. As he steadied himself on the water, his paws barely breaking the surface as they gazed at each other, Ahauizotl remarked, "I didn't know ponies were capable of such feats, but a cheap decoy is it all it is." Naruto said, "Decoy or not, it still worked on you, and I really wouldn't talk about cheap. You nearly drowned me." He looked at Ahauizotl, trying to figure out how he was walking on the water, and finally dismissed his magical attacks. Sadly, that wasn't the only thing on his mind. Even though the amulet piece was becoming increasingly bothersome as he used it, Naruto was somewhat grateful for clinging to it. It gave him the clarity to create a clone and use it to replace himself, something he had never been able to do before, but after he did it, something felt strange. "I thought he said that unicorns weren't affected by the unicorn piece." He disregarded the Pegasus part's whispers, as it made him think of the foolish, pointless things he used to do when he was bored, and veered off topic to more daring subjects, such as saving princesses. The unicorn part was extremely annoying because it was similar to dealing with Kyuubi. It was an adrenaline rush that promised him more power if he gave in. As his tail missed Naruto, Ahauizotl declared, "It's the easier way to deal with pests, but since that didn't work, it just means I have to take a more hands-on approach." His paws dipped into the water, rerouting his body towards a landing Naruto, and his fist sank into Naruto's belly, causing him to skid across the water. Ahauizotl's fist struck Naruto's muzzle, sending him flying for a few seconds before he resurfaced dripping with water, denying him any chance to recover as he kicked Naruto across the water. Ahauizotl grinned and said, "Come on, I thought you were better than that. I'm taking you seriously now, you should do the same." Naruto's normally spiky hair was flattened by the water, and he was unable to stop coughing as he choked out more. He shivered as his body attempted to acclimate to the chilly Tiber River. As he straightened himself, Naruto said, "Sorry, but even if I took you seriously, I still couldn't give it my all." Ahauizotl burst out laughing as they looked at one another. As he started to glide across the water, circling Naruto, the stallion craned his head to watch his opponent. "Oh, that's hilarious. Are you saying I'm not worthy of seeing your go all out? I've been in control of this whole fight. What can you do to turn it around?" Ahuizotl smiled. With a sigh, Naruto tapped into the magic, his head moving slightly in Ahuizotl's direction as the magic developed on his hooves. Naruto's expression turned to one of satisfaction as he gazed at Ahuizotl's downed form. The water he was standing over was bubbling as he fell into the water, dodging the punch that was thrown at him and countering with his on as he shot from the water, his hoof planting into his stomach, sending Ahuizotl flying sideways as he let the amulet piece fall into the water. Naruto thought, "Yep, still can't go all out." The rush of pure adrenaline was almost completely gone. As he got up, Ahuizotl choked, "That was really good. I don't think I've ever been hit that hard ever." However, Naruto was already on him, slamming his hoof into his face and sending him further down the Tiber River, while the fragment of the amulet he was holding fell into the water before Naruto began to feel exhausted. The process was repeated 5 more times. "Stay down, damn it." Naruto sighed as he watched Ahuizotl rise once more, the blonde stallion standing up after another blow and pondering what it would take to defeat his opponent. Ahuizotl's nose was bleeding freely, displaying the effects of Naruto's most recent attack, and he appeared to be happy with the fact that Naruto was running on steam as his horn glowed brightly. Naruto's head lowered as his eyes on Ahuizotl shook off whatever cobwebs remained. "It seems like nothing is enough to take this guy down. Brute force isn't enough to knock him out. Magic isn't working on him at all. I'm going to actually have to use that." As he sailed forward with his tail underwater and his 2 hands rising above Naruto and slamming into him, Ahuizotl said calmly, "That trick won't work twice." Naruto's head dipped as he struggled to stay upright, his horn lit up. Ahuizotl rose in the air with a fist-sized ball of energy in his left front hoof, and his tail shot out, giving the blonde a vicious haymaker. Boom! Naruto's eyes widened as he saw Ahuizotl's eyes widen in terror. Then, an explosion rocked the two of them, sending Ahuizotl into the air and Naruto violently underwater. In the distance of Rome, Naruto winced as he stood on top of the stallion, who emerged from the water with his left hoof severely mangled from his valued technique. The stallion remained silent. Naruto winced while attempting to move his leg and remarked, "I still can't believe the Rasengan does that." Since that was all he saw, the conclusion was, to put it mildly, intriguing. Phyra honestly thought the stallion would defeat Ahuizo more gracefully if his wounds were to go by, but it appeared that the blonde was still having problems with his opponent even after that repulsive mare had cast all those enchantments on him. If he had been as skilled in magic as Sunset Shimmer and Shining Armor, he would have easily defeated Ahuizotl and the dispersion enchantments placed on him, which made him wonder why he had suffered such injuries. It's possible that he misjudged the colt's abilities. It wouldn't be the first time, but regardless of whether he was on par with them or not, none of them could match him, and it was now time for him to introduce himself to the stallion. Naruto looked up and saw a dragon of some kind leaning on the rail of the bridge, approvingly observing him. "Bravo! You quite the impressive pony. No wonder my master sees you as an actual problem. I absolutely loved everything you did to send him flying. Your talent almost made me lose my mind. What are your desires?" Given that Naruto was beaten mercilessly for half of the battle and spent the remaining time squandering almost all of his magic in an attempt to survive and complete the battle with Ahuizotl, the words were as full of bravado as he could muster. As the drake drummed his talons on the railing, Naruto's gaze hardened and he said, "I'm here for the amulet, of course. And it'd be in your best interest to give it to me, or else I fear my tail will snap this Pegasus's body in two." As he watched Spitfire appear dangerously tangled in the drake's tail, Naruto stiffened, saying, "Now you know where we both stand. Give me the amulet and she goes free." Phyra grinned as he saw Naruto drop his head. The triumphant expression he saw in his eyes was pure bliss. "After I give her the amulet, what will stop you from murdering her?" Naruto asked, avoiding eye contact with the drake who was gazing at his reflection in the water. "You're right. I don't seem to be as trustworthy as you are." The drake grinned as he observed Naruto nod, his tail dangling from the bridge with Spitfire coiled with it. "How about this instead? I hold her over the water and you do that magical crap you do, and I let her go after I get the second piece, and that goes without saying that you won't attack me until we meet again. No matter what I have to save her." Naruto mentally prepared himself as the familiar tint of silver filled his eyes as he threw the piece forward, ready to teleport with all his magic if he dared betray him. The drake clenched the second amulet piece tightly as his tail uncoiled, dropping Spitfire to the water below. As Naruto rushed forward, his eyes grew sad as he lifted the first piece of the amulet up with his magic, sending it towards the drake once it was safely in his grasp. The drake blinked as Naruto's rush appeared to be faster than a pony or a unicorn should be. catching Spitfire from a potential death with his front hooves and standing on his hind hooves, cradling her body against his as he stared upwards at the startled Drake. Naruto let out the tiniest sighs of relief as he waited for the Drake to go, his legs trembling and his left bleeding freely as his muscles protested that he should never put them through that much stress in a day again, and Naruto was inclined to agree as he made his way to shore, gently placing Spitfire before collapsing on the cobblestone. Naruto ignored the sound of the citizens' hoofs clopping and bleeding as they approached him, and it seemed like only a few seconds passed before he fell asleep. "Oh my son! What took place with you? Drake, where are you? Ahuizotl, where are you? How did the amulet end up?" Daring's words came out as she dropped his saddlebag next to the pony duo. Magenta's eyes started to well up with tears as she examined the injuries on Naruto's body, including a horribly burned left hoof that was bleeding, not heavily, but enough to cause concern, and what she thought was a ton of bruising. Now that she had a closer look at Spitfire, who was currently snoring, Daring could see that she was in no better shape, and her right front leg was covered in blood. Daring didn't know where to look for the Wonderbolt's wound, despite her best efforts to remain neutral. As he picked himself up off the ground, Naruto's eyes snapped open, shocking the locals and frightening a worried Daring in the process. "Man, that was good nap. Who knew cobblestone was so comfy?" Naruto said with a hint of sarcasm, hiding his wincing under a grumpy exterior. The crowd approached as Daring grabbed his saddlebag, and Naruto hefted a now awake Spitfire onto his back, ignoring the wave of pain shooting up his leg and his close friend's protests. "We need to get there fast." Naruto looked hopelessly lost among the sea of goats that surrounded them. Daring said, "The hospital is a mile or two east." Naruto nodded as he turned to face her and headed east, determined to support his comrade before riding the closest train home and telling Princess Celestia what he had just gone through. He knew that if anyone would know how to defeat that thing, it would be her. After 4.5 days, nobody in the train cart was willing to discuss the unsuccessful attempt to recover the Alicorn amulet. Daring occasionally glanced at Naruto with regret, then changed her expression to one of worry as she gazed at the still healing left hoof. Naruto would occasionally catch a glimpse of a sleeping Spitfire leaning against him, her hoof heavily bandaged, wondering how much it would affect her responsibilities as a Wonderbolt. Daring's eyes went downcast as she said, "I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I should have never dragged you into the middle of this." Had she been more persistent or even a little less paranoid, she wouldn't have entangled these two amazing idiots in her adventure. As he felt Spitfire's muzzle dig into the bend of his neck, Naruto said, "That's stupid. You didn't drag us into this. We chose to help you and everyone's fine. I can't speak for Spitfire, but I'll be fine before we get to Canterlot. I wouldn't have helped you if I wasn't okay with it. We did lose the amulet, but it's not like that's the end of Equestria." As she narrowed her eyes at the two of them, Daring remarked, "It could be, if someone as strong as you got a hold of that amulet. I don't think Equestria could handle the destruction they'd cause." Didn't he realize that lives were on the line? You of all ponies should know how intoxicating that amulet is. In order to allow Spitfire to rest on the comfortable seats and allow him to talk to Daring without disturbing his friend, Naruto blinked and shook his head. "Yeah, but it's not that intoxicating. I've experienced worse." Naruto turned his head away as he thought about Kyuubi's chakra. Those episodes were undoubtedly far worse than dealing with the amulet. As she gazed at the unicorn and stroked the back of his head, Daring shot back, "Sure, and it was somebody else that kept looking in your saddlebag. Honestly, I never thought I'd seen someone obsess over it so much." Naruto met Daring's gaze and grinned slightly as he used his magic to move the saddlebag between them. "I wasn't checking on the amulet, honestly. I kind of needed to make sure everything was in the other bag." Daring's voice stopped short of a shout as the sleeping Wonderbolt allowed her injured hoof to hang loosely in her slumber. "Yes, because a few broken colored jewels is more important than something that could cause the end of the world." With the contents of the bag spilling out in front of them, Naruto remarked, "Maybe not to you, but to me, I can't risk disappointing my teacher by losing it. Do you even know what these are, Daring?" Daring's magenta eyes fell on the bag between them as Naruto said, "These are fragments of the elements of harmony, and my teacher thinks that I'll find the 4 element bearers to complete the set." The archaeologist looked away, searching for something else to occupy her attention. Daring looked at him, refusing to fall for such a blatant lie, and said, "So I'm supposed to believe that you conveniently carry around the things that saved Equestria not even a month ago? Funny, because I read that Twilight Sparkle and some of her friends saved the world by purging Princess Luna of the evil that possessed her. Another thing, what would you even get from telling me such a stupid lie? Huh? Would I get some newfound respect for you, or perhaps I believe you?" Daring listened just for a second. Naruto attempted to clarify, hoping that at least now his cries would be taken into account. "No, you listen if you want to lie to me, that's okay. I'm really accustomed to it now. But that just implies that everything you've told me thus far has been false, hasn't it? Daring yelled, I was so foolish to think you were my friend. You're just like everyone else I've met. They have to lie in some spectacular fashion when they fail to meet my expectations. She turned to leave, but Naruto's magic had frozen her in place, so she forced back the tears that threatened to fall down her muzzle. Daring, Naruto hesitated once more as Daring turned to face him, her eyes intensely angry. What distinguishes you from every other person I've met? As she ignored Naruto's expression, Daring said, they sold me out. Every time I thought I could do something good for Equestria, I find myself alone and betrayed, so congratulations on sticking around with me for the ride of shame. Ahuizotl, Cabanero, museum curators, and so many others have lied to me, and now you're one of them. I'm just tired of it. But what about your books and their characters? With a doubtful expression on his face, Naruto inquired. Yes, I did win, but it's not like my victories saved the world. At most, I prevented Ahuizotl from using terror to rule a nation. As she looked at Naruto, who appeared more remorseful than irritated with her, Daring spat out angrily, I'm sure he's gained enough gold from us meeting one another to buy his own country. And don't get me started on my so-called companions. You two are the most competent ponies I've worked with so far. As he wondered if Spitfire and himself were the ones she was truly upset with, Naruto said, so why are you angry at us then? We got our flanks handed to us because we believed in you. We believed that you were doing the right thing. Before you ask, I've been awake since you apologized to him, and I think I'll sleep in the next card over until you two settle whatever you're going to do. The Wonderbolt yawned as she waltzed past Naruto, brushing her wing across his horn before moving past Daring carelessly. We did nothing wrong, Naruto. She's just venting at this point, and it's a whole lot of bitching to me, but I'm not the one trying to make friends with her here. Since Spitfire shifted her wings to cover her head and left, wondering how long it would take Daring to speak, Naruto remained silent. So I guess what she said was true then. You're just angry because, well, we all failed, right? Naruto could practically see the Pegasus's pent-up rage and anger dissipate, as though the straightforward truth was all she needed to relax. In Rome, I had the chance to be what I imagined myself to be, and before I met that Drake, I thought if I could protect that amulet even if it cost me my life that it would be worth it in the end. Daring said, not trying to hide her range of emotions at this point. She was simply tired of feeling second best where it mattered most, and all that anger, sadness, and resentment just boiled over finding the nearest target to lash out against. Everything I believed I could do vanished when I saw that corpse, and my conviction wavered, Daring says as firmly as she can as she watches Naruto glance at her briefly before turning to face the ceiling. Naruto, I failed. I failed on such a scale that I might have doomed Equestria. Yeah, I suppose we didn't succeed because that was the goal, but can we really say that it will be the end of Equestria? It's unbelievable that one pony could defeat Equestria on its own. As Naruto tried to think of what Celestia would say to soothe the mare, it suddenly occurred to him, Daring, I don't know how many times you've failed in life, but it's not about sitting down and resting on your flank when you lose, but it's about picking yourself up and trying again. We just lost, and as much as I hate losing, there's nothing I can do about it right now. Naruto felt a little proud of himself for channeling his inner Celestia. It wasn't as difficult as he had anticipated to come up with inspirational ideas. Failure is the easy part of life. Success is what makes it magical. And why do you know so much about failure? As she looked at Naruto, who gave her his customary smile, Daring asked. Because, aside from the princesses, I don't believe any other pony in Equestria is more knowledgeable about failure than I am. Naruto grinned as he recalled his most recent victory in discovering his best friend as the element of harmony. I've failed so many times in my life that I can tell you without a doubt that when I did triumph, that feeling is indescribable, but it's even better when you share those successes with a friend. As she slowly picked up one of the broken fragments and held it in front of Naruto's face, Daring said, I'll think on it, Naruto. I don't promise anything, but I won't ignore what you said. But this still proves you're lying to me. The gem glowed in between her wings, taking on a new look as a golden necklace with her cutie mark displayed on it, leaving the mare perplexed and causing a smile to grow on Naruto's face. But how? I don't understand this. Daring looked at Naruto, hoping for an explanation, while Naruto picked up the remaining crystals, his smile still there. As they pulled into Canterlot, Naruto's last words were, Daring, I didn't lie when I said these were the elements of harmony, and I think you should probably talk to my teacher. She can probably explain this better than I could. He watched the mare's face change from hard to soft to a variety of confused expressions that he found increasingly difficult to take seriously. I'm sure the Princess Celestia would love to meet you anyways. Phyra remained silent as he made his way across the plains. He had been traveling north for 4 days since leaving Rome, which had been a successful endeavor, and he had learned more than enough about the purported threat known as Naruto Uzumaki. The unicorn was resilient and had a lot of magic, but that was all that made him stand out for one of Celestia's students, so he was curious to see how far he could go with those two qualities. His scales pricked as he felt the wind blow across the plains, and all but a small section of the tall grass moved with the wind, revealing his intended location. His big steps became smaller as he steadied his approach, and he finally reached the barrier. The first leg of his tree trunk entered it nervously, and the sensation of pushing the rest of his body through the substance was a comparison to wading through jelly, before he found himself in a damp cave with onlookers. The voice called out, "Oh goody, you've returned." Fire squinted, trying to see where the voice was coming from as hundreds of cat-like eyes opened, all focused on him as he stared back, wondering if he was going to be attacked or if he was just hoping for a fight that would never happen. "Most of us were expecting you to come in much later, say next year when the master passed on." The owner of the eyes scattered, scurrying away from the blue flame that was directed at them. "Do not question my loyalty when I have been serving for nearly 5 centuries, unlike yourself." Fire growled as he walked through the cave, ignoring the murmurs of words that came from each set of eyes. He didn't care much for these creatures, especially when they only swore allegiance to his master out of fear rather than out of the respect he truly deserved. His gaze strayed to an odd-looking earth pony listening to a unicorn, and although he could say that he hated almost all living things, even the one in front of him. "I'm happy to see you're back, Fire." As he nodded, Fire broke eye contact with the mare and said, "I hope the enchantments proved to be in your favor since your foe broke them." Reassessing Naruto's abilities, he said, "You seem troubled. I assure you that it was with my best capabilities to put those on a Huizodal without his privy knowledge." The unicorn spoke cautiously as her gaze strayed past the drake towards a few basilisks slithering around the cavern, their fangs digging into the corpse of a diamond dog that dared trespass. The earth pony nodded and stretched slightly, clicking its teeth together as the drake said, "It's fine, I have the amulet and that's all that matters. I'll give our master the amulet and discuss what I've learned. I suggest learning the mannerisms of an earth pony if you're going to be of use of us changeling. Your queen might have thought it was cute sending a larva to us, but I have no problem sending whatever remains of your body back to her." The earth pony nodded once more as it transformed back into the changeling that had been looking toward the unicorn for assistance, only to be sned for his trouble. "Shit. Please try to disperse the basilisk. We don't need them harming each other more than our enemies do we?" The unicorn batted her eyelashes as she watched the drake snort a flame of indifference. "Ah, charm, speak. The subtlest magic of all. Give me an army of feeble minds and the wonders with such a thing would even make you try envious Fire," the unicorn said in a soft but commanding tone as the changelings fell in line heading towards the basilisk as it diligently went to separate them from the little remains of the diamond dog. "I don't like subtlety or parlor tricks as much as you do, but I can see how it helped you succeed in the shadows. But these things," Fire spat in disgust, gesturing wildly to the thousands of eyes, the occasional changeling, and the basilisk that adorned the ground. "Why must we lower ourselves to working alongside these creatures when we should be appealing to the Wendigos, chimeras, and even those shackled in Tartarus?" Fire shouted, his patience waning as the seconds went by. It was this bold thinking that made her the group's decision-maker. Fire was the muscle and errand boy, and while she occasionally had to use some of her skills to help him, this most recent endeavor is a prime example, but ultimately, it was all for the greater good. The unicorn could only shake her head at the gesture. "We both know that the Wendigo are long extinct, and I doubt that any that are left would help us achieve our conquest objectives. Feeding 3 mouths for 1 soldier is a waste of food, and chimeras are an issue that would take years to resolve. We don't want that kind of investigation to be conducted on us, and we don't have the authority to control half of the insane people who live there, so the prisoners are out of the question. We're almost finished with the first phase of operations anyhow, and the sooner we get him back to his former glory, the sooner we'll move on to more important tasks. However, for the time being, we should appeal to the waking sirens that Star Swirl took pity on. We need to find something that would be enough to wake them from their slumber and have an allegiance with them," she said, gesturing to the opening door, and the drake stepped forward with a disgruntled expression on its face, knowing that this wasn't the right time or location to talk about recruitment, even though they still needed their leader back. The next afternoon, Canterlot School of Magic, Training Yard. Naruto yawned as he prepared another block of stone on a pedestal, his coat soaked with perspiration as he placed it awkwardly, one of the few times he wished he had fingers to help him with this kind of thing. He ignored the rubble on the pedestal's edge, the remnants of previous blocks he destroyed, and said, "All right, let's try it again." The blonde sighed as he prepared himself, standing a distance away from the pedestal, sending a bolt of magic directly at the stone, shattering it to pieces, causing Naruto to groan. "It didn't do anything. I thought these bricks were supposed to resist magic. I didn't even see it flinch." As Naruto turned his head to face the sky, he saw Daring Do hovering over him with a knowing look. I believe the saying, alone we're weak but united we're strong. That's because the bricks runes spell interlock with one another. It's very intricate and ingenious considering how far unicorns have come in magic. The knowing voice called out. I believe the saying, alone we're weak but united we're strong. Daring said as she landed next to him, her wings closing up as she gazed at the rubble on the ground. Naruto looked at the pile of stones and said, really? Well, that sucks. I can't shoot at the wall, it's just going to make the guards and Celestia mad. Before giving in, he said, so how's Canterlot? In an attempt to shift the conversation away from the reason he was doing this in the first place, Naruto asked. Yes, I have visited this place numerous times, but I have never stayed for very long. You know, books, research, leads and all, but this time it's different. I can actually sort of enjoy things now, Daring remarked, missing the smile that appeared on Naruto's face as he listened. To be honest, the best part is that I can visit the royal archives. That's something that ponies like me dream about. Her swooning over a few books reminded Naruto of Twilight and her slight obsession with a good book, but he ignored it and rolled his eyes. The history written in those tomes are just. Naruto said, that's good to hear, glad you like staying here and decided to stay here for the time being, Daring. The Pegasus nodded, her face turning into a frown as she gave him a frustrated look. Wait, what is it this time? With a sigh, Daring crossed her wings and turned to face Naruto. Call me Honeydew. Honestly, if you start calling me Daring Do in public, all it's going to do is drag a bunch of attention my way that I don't want or care for. With a smile on his lips as the Shadow's owner landed, Naruto said honestly, sure, that shouldn't be too hard, I guess. So anything else? I mean, you don't seem the type to come here to give me a history lesson, you know. Well, I was actually asked to see if you were interested in learning some magic. Daring paused, trying to remember the right way to phrase it without confusing Naruto. As it took her a moment to realize what the pony wanted her to say to him, she sighed as she glanced at the ground and then smiled back at Naruto. Well, I don't think you can teach me much after all. Most magic requires a horn, unless that has changed. Has it changed? Naruto asked angrily as Daring shook her head, causing Naruto to sigh in relief. I mean, being stuck on the moon for 1,000 years has to keep you behind the times, Daring said with a smile as Naruto leaned towards her, his nose scrunching up into something she found mildly endearing as he waited for her to tell him who was interested. No, but she's pretty adamant on teaching you, or I think, it was kind of confusing for even me. As Daring gazed at him doubtfully, perhaps knowing something he didn't, Naruto pondered, wait, why would Luna want to teach me, and what could she teach me honestly? Daring could literally see the gears in Naruto's head grinding as he processed the information, and he felt the slightest bit of satisfaction as he paled. Well, besides raising and lowering the moon, Princess Lua was known for a great deal of magic before her banishment, especially when it came to water-based magic. As he smiled, recalling some of the things water could do when he was a ninja, Naruto thought, water magic could be really helpful. I mean, I'm hitting a wall with the regular stuff, and I can't do fire without setting everything and myself on fire. With magic, things could only get better. Speaking of injuring yourself and others, you're not like most ponies, you know. I mean, most ponies usually aren't so hard, Naruto said, receiving a slight embarrassed glance from Daring. Yeah, you're the most physically fit pony I've ever seen, and since you're a unicorn, it's kind of a big deal, Daring said, shedding the slight embarrassment she felt from staring at him. As he made his way to the exit in the hopes that Princess Luna would be willing to teach him something, Naruto said with a determined expression, I guess I'm weird then. If I have to go through a bunch of enemies just to help my friend, I'll do it in a heartbeat, because it's the best way I know to help. Naruto remained silent while gazing at the princess's room. He had envisioned it to be opulent and costly to match her status, but it was incredibly minimalist. He would even say it was a little more bare than his own room. The unicorn was exhausted from simply staring at the white walls, a bookshelf adorned with a few trinkets that might have been old mementos, and a single book leaning against a paper-matched crown. As he stood calmly in Princess Luna's room, waiting for her to show up and possibly teach him something new about magic, Naruto remarked, not what I would expect honestly. His gaze strayed to the opening door, where he saw a struggling Luna dragging something into the room with new resolve, followed closely by Celestia and 2 guards. Celestia looked hesitantly at the object and said, Luna, you must seriously reconsider using that to train Naruto. We couldn't even go through that training without moving to something else to calm our nerves. If it was what she believed it to be, she feared for Naruto's health and patience, because this was possibly the most annoying thing the 2 alicorns had come to train under when they studied under Star Swirl the Bearded. While both alicorns stared at each other, assessing each other's intentions, Luna watched as whatever her sister wanted to say died in her throat. I'm aware of the difficulty of this wall, but I have faith in Naruto here that he can learn it even if it will take him a while. We both see in him a potential that could blossom with the right push. As the guards shuffled away, Luna said, "Sister, place your faith in me like you placed it in all those ponies to do what was right against Nightmare Moon." She wasn't sure if the subject would spark something that was better left between the two sisters. As she turned to leave, Celestia said, "Luna, I have never lost faith in you, and if you believe that you can teach him then please do, but I am here if you ever need some pony to talk to, an advisor of sorts." It was a relief that Luna had discovered something she was passionate about, even if it was successfully training the unicorn that almost killed her in order to protect Equestria. They were far from her sister's room, so the brief silence didn't last long as he took off his helmet to reveal a deeply worried shining armor. A guard said, "Parent, do you think it's wise for Naruto to be trained? We all know exactly what he can do, and you know he's untrained, and the only thing stopping him from truly being the strongest unicorn in Equestria is the fact that he is untrained. Forgive me for speaking out of turn, but Princess, do you think it's wise for him to be trained?" With a hint of laughter, Celestia said, "I think this is the best course of action right now, Shining. If I think that what Luna has in store for him is something that not even the most patient of unicorns can handle it's possibly the most infuriating thing I've ever done, and that's counting talking to my constituents in the early day of Equestria. Shining, you of all ponies should know that Naruto's heart is always in the right place." The captain turned away, feeling a little ashamed for having doubts about the princess and Naruto. The helmet was quickly taken off as a much older earth pony gazed at the two. His dusted tan coat spoke volumes about his age, and his thinning gray mane did nothing to help his case either. "Hogwash to that, we should imprison him and be done with it. That unicorn is about as useful to the cause as he is to himself. He acts without thinking of repercussions, and the incident in Rome will not go away, nor will a lot of the problems that he's caused over the years. It's best we isolate him now before his heart decides that we're the ones that are in his way." He ignored the looks directed at him, despite the fact that a large scar ran down his left eye, clearly making it useless. "If we are ever to have control of a situation like what happened with your sister, we need to be the ones to resolve this situation, not some idiot that thinks his way of doing things is better than Equestria's own military." As the earth pony snorted and continued down the hall, muttering curses to a lucky orange unicorn, Celestia said, "General Iron, may I remind you that he saved countless lives, including my own, by acting on those convictions, and yes, I believe we should consult him about his reactions in foreign lands, but Naruto will not betray Equestria. Even you must realize that, but I know my student, if you force his hoof he will retaliate and then his actions will be placed on your hooves." Celestia sighed wistfully and turned right, allowing Shining to walk beside her. "I fear he lacks the vision that he once held. He'll hold on to that hatred towards Naruto like so many other members of Canterlot's high society." Shining asked curiously, "What did Naruto do to him?" General Iron isn't one to hold grudges, so Naruto must have done something truly horrible to garner such hatred. Although Shining was relatively new to his appointed role as captain of the Royal Guard, he was aware of General Iron's reputation for being lenient toward even the most destructive elements of Equestria, the Mad Griffin bombers being a prime example of that destruction. Celestia turned to face the library, her eyes lingering for what seemed like minutes as she imagined Twilight spending hours upon hours in the lone room trying to improve herself magically. "Shining, Naruto has done some things for our country and General Iron is nearly aware of everything that he's done for us, though even the greatest of deeds come with a price, and that's all I can say on that particular subject. I think it's time I took a personal interest in my students' training as well." "Twilight?" Shining inquired, assuming that Naruto would be too preoccupied to manage two training regimens and that Sunset, aside from being the cunning mare she was, had not demonstrated any interest in developing her skills. Celestia wistfully ignored Shining's displeased expression and said, "No, Sunset, she's been too lax as of late, and that isn't something I can abide from my senior student." Celestia said in a tone that left no room for further discussion, "I have high hopes for that mare, more than Naruto, so Shining, I hope you will not hold a grudge against her. While you see untapped potential in your sister, which I see as well, I see things in Sunset that most ponies overlook. Naruto, Twilight, and Sunset work masterfully together according to my sister, which makes me believe that in due time the animosity among one another will disappear. That is what Equestria needs." The Royal Library's forbidden section was typically a peaceful place, with dust covering the shelves and demonic books whispering sweet nothings to one another and the few insects that dared to live there. Today was different, though, as two posing figures sat across from each other among the dusty books. One of them occasionally grunted while the other kept to herself, studying the more ancient books. "Check," the words reverberated throughout the almost deserted library as a Pegasus and unicorn squared off against one another. Up until that point, It had been a fairly one-sided affair as Daring successfully dismantled any offense that Sunset attempted to make, and the Pegasus had assumed that she would have felt rather offended given that she gave her 3 pieces in a show of camaraderie. As she advanced her final night, Sunset muttered absently, "You're much better at this than Naruto." She soon realized her error when Daring's subsequent move successfully removed the piece from the board, putting her back in check. As she caught Sunset's fleeting glance, Daring remarked, "Well, I've played this for a long time, and Naruto doesn't seem the type to sit down and play a board game." The game was almost over, and both mares knew it was only 2 moves away. Sunset tipped her king to indicate that she had forfeited the chess game, which caused the adventurer to smile slightly. "True, and I never did have anyone that I could stand long enough to play a full game with, besides Celestia." The Pegasus nodded a little less enthusiastically as she couldn't help but be distracted by the quantity of books the restricted section of the library held. "Another game?" Sunset asked innocently enough as she rearranged the pieces in the proper order while keeping an eye on Daring. As Sunset completed arranging the pieces on the board, Daring repressed a few more thoughts and said honestly, "I just can't imagine anyone not wanting to take the time and read these. I mean, if I were you, I'd be visiting each day finding more about Equestria's past than I could dare hope to dream." Sunset glanced at the board, trying to figure out how to begin the game, and said, "I'd advise having someone of the magical nature here to help you look through these books." Sunset pointed to the game and said, "Even though I can't imagine you sorting through the more magical ones. I mean, history is more your thing, isn't it, Daring Do?" As she advanced her pawn. As her wing moved the knight with a little more force than was necessary, the mare remarked, "You clearly have me mistaken. My name is Honey, not Daring Do." Sunset grinned slightly. Daring said confidently as the smirk vanished, "Stop smirking. I told you I'm not. You can even go ask Naruto and Spitfire if you want, and they'll tell you the same thing I told you." As Daring pressed Sunset, the game went on in silence. The unicorn made mistakes against the seasoned veteran, and Daring's assault eventually cornered Sunset's king. As she moved a piece to expose her king to the Pegasus, Sunset said, "Well then, I'll tell you exactly why I know you're the famed mare in the series, and not so no-name like you claim." The nostrils flared with mild rage as Sunset returned to the topic. As Sunset watched Daring swiftly make her move while glaring at her, she remarked, "Your cutie mark is a big flag if I've ever seen one, and before you dispute, what is the odds that a mare looks exactly like the one on the cover, except she doesn't have her signature pit helm, isn't her?" As she watched the Pegasus's eyes fall to the board, Sunset said, "Now my theory is that you sell your stories to fund your little explorations, and well, Miss Noling wanted to honor you even the slightest and made you her main character. Tell me I'm wrong and checkmate." Her king backed into a corner, missing the little tactic Sunset was using to entice her in. Sunset was, to put it mildly, a very perceptive mare, and Daring could only hang her head in defeat. She was Daring Do, and she was also the author of the highly regarded series, so the secret she took great pride in wasn't really a secret to anyone who paid attention or simply trusted the signs. Daring said reluctantly, "Yeah, you're right. My name is Daring Do." Sunset's eyes brightened a little at the admission as Sunset nodded appreciatively and peered curiously at the chessboard. Daring said, "I hope you can understand that I want this to be kept a secret. I mean, if ponies knew who I was, I couldn't stop being badgered by fans." With the utmost honesty, Sunset stated, "I honestly don't care who you are or what you can do. The only reason I ask this is because I want to know who is standing beside Naruto. That unicorn is all kinds of things, and idiot is one of the first words that come to mind, but he's something special to me and a few other ponies, so I just wanted to know from the element of honesty right now, can I just count on you to protect Naruto from the idiocy that he'll drag you, myself, and those around him into?" Daring said, "You can count on me. I'll talk some sense into him when no one wants to." The two exchanged a curt response before the board reset itself once more and the mares started a new game, this time with a modicum of mutual respect. "Though now I have a question for you. How special is he to you?" Daring asked, observing Sunset's cheeks turn the tiniest shade of pink as she looked down at the board. The mare was clearly enamored with the orange unicorn, which she could understand even when she doubted everything about the unicorn. Naruto still exuded that aura, and it was perhaps the best thing about him. If Daring was honest with anyone who dared to ask, there was something about Naruto that drew you in, and when you were close, you felt a slight sense of security. If you were to ask the captain of the Wonderbolt Spitfire, she would readily admit to enjoying all of the sounds that accompanied the training ground, much to the chagrin of all the other members of the illustrious Flyers. The Wonderbolt training grounds were never quiet for very long. Although she knew they were the elite of elite for a reason, she loved almost everything about the Wonderbolts, including their fame and the respect they received from almost every Pegasus that flew. If you were to ask her what she didn't like most about the Wonderbolts, she would say paperwork. She hated it. especially since she was the Wonderbolt's captain and had to go through everyone else's forms when the Wonderbolts were involved. As she eyed the tower of paperwork, Spitfire couldn't help but sneer. She was certain that some of it was a new request for more modern, form-fitting clothing to help reduce air resistance on certain tasks that required speed more than skill and aerial control. Soren was going to get those as soon as possible. They were likely detailed receipts of what was spent this week and what was used for their Wonderbolt fund. Not to mention the many requests for various tasks that ranged from showing up for someone's birthday to flying over dragon territory to scope out the activity and get an account for the great dragon migration that was bound to occur. There were also reports of what the veterans and rookies were doing and how various events went in her absence. However, she always found it boring that they all needed a stamp of approval or disapproval. An hour went by, and the pile still didn't seem to be getting any smaller as she read Fleur de Lis's request for a Wonderbolt's opinion on the newest outfit. Compared to the previous requests she had rejected, this one seemed reasonable, and her husband Fancy Pants was a kind unicorn who would provide them with immediate financial assistance if any Wonderbolt asked him in a reasonable manner. With a quick stamp of approval, she would find the ideal Pegasus to assist them as the doorknob turned and Fleetfoot entered. Her gaze moved to the door as they shut the door behind her. The mare sat down in front of Spitfire and gestured for her to speak first, causing the Pegasus to shift uneasily. Spitfire clicked her teeth in curiosity as Fleetfoot muttered, "Misty Fly, wants you demoted and someone more qualified to take your place," Fleetfoot complained as she noticed Spitfire's injured hoof making her wince. "I know it's not much, but in the past few weeks, it's becoming more and more apparent that she sees you as more of some pony enjoying the benefits, rather than taking your work as seriously as you should be." With her head resting on her wounded hind hoof, Spitfire eyed the Pegasus and said, "Interesting, and do you have any proof of these claims?" The Pegasus winced once more. Fleetfoot nodded while attempting to divert her attention from the wound and concentrate on the task at hand. "Well, I have first hoof accounts, even one myself, and I'm positive if you ask Soren he'd tell you the same thing I've told you." Fleetfoot was a little anxious as she waited for Spitfire to respond. The mare was looking thoughtfully past her, which unnerved the rookie Wonderbolt. To be honest, she wasn't uncomfortable around Spitfire in general. Rather, it was her stoic demeanor when she was in Wonderbolt mode that made her feel uneasy, as if she were analyzing everything and even the smallest interrogations were happening. With a slight frown on her lips, Spitfire got up from her chair and grabbed a paper from her desk, saying, "Thanks for the information, Fleetfoot, you're dismissed." Her gaze strayed to the motionless Pegasus, who was staring at her uncomfortably. Her tone became slightly sharper as Fleetfoot stood up, but she still had an inquisitive look on her face. "I said you were dismissed, Fleetfoot." With her eyes fixed on Fleetfoot, Spitfire reluctantly asked, "What is it?" as her left wing started mindlessly filling out a form. "It's just what are you going to do about Misty?" Fleetfoot asked, a little nervously, hoping that her teammate wouldn't suffer any negative consequences, even if it meant demoting their captain. Spitfire's tone was flat as she watched Fleetfoot cock her head in bewilderment while Spitfire gave her own form her approval. "Nothing, Misty Fly has done nothing wrong. She's just voicing her concern over apparent, questionable leadership skills. I did it when I was just a member of the Wonderbolts. I'm now the captain, and while I've slacked off a bit in your eyes, the only thing that ever mattered to me as a Wonderbolt is still razor sharp as ever, and it's not going to change anytime soon," Spitfire stated with honesty that was concealed by her typical voice. In an attempt to show her captain that she understood what she had said, Fleetfoot nodded as she hurried to the door. It didn't matter that Misty Fly was descended from Commander Hurricane or that she disapproved of Spitfire's actions as the Wonderbolt captain. Spitfire only seemed to be genuinely concerned with the Wonderbolt's aerial prowess. This was something she could support. After Fleetfoot left, Spitfire didn't say anything because her thoughts were focused on the upcoming competition in Cloudsdale, especially with the young flyers of Equestria. She wondered what possible prospects would make an appearance and whether the one mare she'd heard about in whispers would attend the small gathering. Any pony with the slightest clue knew that she was interested in the stallion, but if she were to butt flanks with a little Miss Sunset to be with him, then the thought of sharing and possibly more had crossed her mind. Besides, she was a rather adaptable mare, so it was clear that she was still thinking of Naruto as an idol. As Spitfire went back to her earlier task, her last thought was of the tiny form resting on her desk. This would dispel any doubts, and that was all that mattered.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.